Welcome aboard, friends. You're now tuned into Magic Bloodline. We're super excited to share today's story with you. What if McGonagall became Minister of Magic instead of Fudge? If you enjoy what we do here, the best way to support us is by liking, commenting, and subscribing. We read every comment. Ready? Let's go. Chapter 1, The Unexpected Minister. The grandfather clock in the headmaster's office struck midnight, each resonant chime seeming to hang in the air longer than it should. Albus Dumbledore sat behind his ornate desk, fingers steepled beneath his silver beard, while Minerva McGonagall paced before him. Her emerald robes swished against the stone floor, the only other sound in the room besides the soft whirring of silver instruments scattered throughout the circular chamber. "They've asked you again, haven't they?" Minerva finally broke the silence, turning sharply to face the headmaster. "To take the minister position?" Dumbledore's blue eyes twinkled behind his half-moon spectacles, but there was weariness in them too. "Indeed. Millicent's retirement has the Wizengamot in quite the flutter. They seem to think I might be persuaded this time. And will you be?" Minerva stopped pacing, her Scottish accent more pronounced with her agitation. "Albus, the ministry needs direction. Proper direction. After what we've been through, I believe my place remains at Hogwarts, Minerva." Dumbledore rose from his chair and walked to Fawkes Perch, stroking the phoenix's brilliant plumage. "Especially with young Harry Potter due to arrive this autumn." Minerva pressed her lips into a thin line. "Then who? Not that pompous fool Fudge, surely. The man couldn't find his way out of a vanishing cabinet if the instructions were written on his hat." A small smile played on Dumbledore's lips. "The shortlist is rather short, I'm afraid. Cornelius has considerable support from certain influential families." "The Malfoys, you mean?" Minerva sniffed. "Lucius always did know where to place his gold for maximum return." "Indeed." Dumbledore turned to face her fully. "Which is why I've put forward another name for consideration." Something in his tone made Minerva pause. The portraits of former headmasters, who had been pretending to sleep, suddenly seemed more attentive. "Whose name?" she asked, though a creeping suspicion was already forming in her mind. "Yours, Minerva." The clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. One portrait, Phineas Nigellus Black, actually opened his eyes to watch her reaction. "That's absurd," Minerva finally managed. "I'm a teacher, Albus, not a politician. And perhaps that's precisely what the ministry needs." Dumbledore returned to his desk, his robes shimmering slightly in the candlelight. "Someone who understands that education and truth are more valuable than popularity and power. The Wizengamot would never agree, they already have." Dumbledore's words fell like stones into still water. "I received the owl this evening. The vote was taken this afternoon." Minerva felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. She gripped the back of a nearby chair. "Without consulting me?" "Albus, this is irregular, yes." Dumbledore nodded. "But these are irregular times. Millicent is stepping down immediately due to health concerns, and they require an answer by morning." Minerva sank into the chair, her mind racing. "What of Hogwarts? My students? The Gryffindors? Arrangements can be made." Dumbledore's voice was gentle. "Severus could take the position of headmaster, with certain guidelines in place, of course." "Severus?" Minerva almost laughed. "The man who treats any student outside of Slytherin like there's something unpleasant stuck to his boot. The very same man who has my complete trust, despite appearances." Dumbledore's tone was firm. "And who would benefit from your occasional guidance in his new role, I expect." Minerva stood and walked to the window, looking out over the moonlit grounds of Hogwarts. For 34 years, this castle had been her home, her purpose. The thought of leaving it felt like contemplating the removal of a vital organ. Yet in her mind's eye, she could see the faces of those they'd lost in the war against Voldemort, the Pruitts, the McKinnons, the Potters. She remembered the Ministry's fumbling response, the years of infiltration that had gone unchecked, the preventable deaths. And now, with Harry Potter about to re-enter the wizarding world, with the whispers and rumors that Albus had shared with her about the possibility that the Dark Lord wasn't truly gone. "You think he's coming back, don't you?" she asked without turning. "That's why you want someone you trust at the Ministry." Dumbledore didn't immediately answer, which was answer enough. "I won't be your puppet, Albus," she said, turning to face him. "If I do this, I do it my way. I would expect nothing less." There was approval in Dumbledore's voice. "In fact, I'm counting on it." Minerva inhaled deeply, her mind made up. "Very well. But Severus will report to me weekly, and at the first sign he's favoring Slytherin unfairly, I shall include that in the conditions of his appointment." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled again, more brightly now. "Minister McGonagall." The title sent a shiver down her spine. "Don't call me that yet. The prophet will have a field day with this. Schoolteacher to run ministry. I can see the headlines now." "I rather think decorated war hero takes helm during uncertain times has a better ring to it," Dumbledore replied, reaching for a piece of parchment. "Now, shall we draft your acceptance before informing the Wisengamot?" As they worked through the night, Minerva couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a maelstrom. But perhaps, she thought, that was exactly where she needed to be. The atrium of the Ministry of Magic had never felt so cavernous to Minerva as it did on this morning. The peacock blue ceiling with its golden symbols moving and changing like some celestial notice board seemed impossibly distant. Witches and wizards hurried past, some openly staring, others pretending not to notice her as they rushed to their departments. Minerva walked with her back straight, her steps measured, ignoring the whispers that followed in her wake. Her emerald robes had been exchanged for more formal attire, deep purple with subtle silver embroidery at the sleeves and collar, a concession to tradition that she'd agreed to after much persuasion from Dumbledore. "Minister McGonagall." A breathless young wizard with a notepad hurried alongside her. "Barnabas Cuff, Editor-in-Chief of the Daily Prophet. Might I trouble you for a brief statement on your unprecedented appointment?" "You may trouble me by making an appointment through my secretary, Mr. Cuff," Minerva replied without breaking stride. "As I'm sure you're aware, this is my first day, and I have much to attend to. But surely your readers would appreciate knowing your immediate priorities. Particularly given your unusual background for this position." Minerva stopped so abruptly that Cuff nearly collided with her. She fixed him with the same stare that had quelled generations of misbehaving students. "My background, Mr. Cuff, includes fighting in 2 wars against the darkest wizard of our time, 34 years educating Britain's magical youth, and a mastery in transfiguration that required more rigorous study than your entire staff has collectively undertaken." Her voice was quiet but carried nonetheless. "My immediate priority is ensuring this ministry functions as it should, protecting magical Britain from threats both external and internal. Now, if you'll excuse me." She continued toward the lifts, leaving Cuff fumbling with his notepad. A small crowd had gathered to watch the exchange, and Minerva caught sight of a young witch with bright pink hair who was grinning openly. "Watcher, Professor," the witch said as Minerva passed. "I mean, Minister." "Sorry." "Quite all right, Miss Tonks," Minerva replied, recognizing her former student. "How is Auror training treating you?" "Brilliant but brutal." Tonks matched her pace as they reached the lifts. "Mad Eye's got us doing concealment and disguise this week. Says I've got a natural advantage." Her hair cycled through several colors as if to demonstrate. "Indeed." Minerva allowed herself a small smile. "I trust you'll use your talents wisely." The lift arrived with a clatter, and several ministry workers squeezed to the sides as they recognized who was entering. Minerva stepped in, and Tonks followed. "Level 1, Minerva instructed, and the lift began to move. "Is it true you're going to replace half the department heads?" Tonks asked in a low voice as the lift clanked upward. "I don't discuss personnel matters in lifts, Miss Tonks," Minerva replied evenly. But I will say that competence will be valued over connections in my administration. Tonks nodded, her hair settling into a subdued blue. Good. Some of the old guard could use a shake-up. Especially after, she glanced around and lowered her voice further. Well, after everything with you-know-who. Not everyone's hands were clean, if you know what I mean. The lift announced, Level 1, Minister's Office and Support Staff, and the golden grills slid open to reveal a corridor lined with thick plush carpet. At the end stood a polished oak door with a gleaming brass nameplate that already read, Minerva McGonagall, Minister for Magic. They work quickly, don't they? Minerva murmured. When it suits them, Tonks replied with a wink. Good luck, Minister. You've got more support than you might think. As the lift doors closed behind her, Minerva took a steadying breath and walked down the corridor. Before she could reach for the handle, the door swung open to reveal a small, toad-like woman with a wide smile that didn't reach her eyes. Minister McGonagall, the woman simpered, extending a hand adorned with several gaudy rings. Dolores Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary. What an unexpected pleasure to welcome you to the ministry. Minerva shook the offered hand briefly. Ms. Umbridge. I don't believe we've had the pleasure. Oh, I've kept to the background, supporting Minister Bagnold in whatever small ways I could. Umbridge stepped aside to allow Minerva entry. I'm sure we'll become fast friends as I help you navigate the complexities of ministry protocol. The office beyond was large and imposing, decorated in dark woods and rich fabrics. Portraits of previous ministers lined the walls, their occupants watching with varying degrees of interest. A massive desk dominated the far end of the room, behind which stood a tall window enchanted to show pleasant weather regardless of actual conditions outside. I've taken the liberty of preparing your schedule for the day, Umbridge continued, following Minerva into the room. The Wisingamot expects a formal address at 10, followed by individual meetings with department heads. I've arranged them in order of seniority, of course. Thank you, Ms. Umbridge, but I'll be rearranging that schedule. Minerva moved behind the desk, surveying the room. My first meeting will be with Amelia Bones from Magical Law Enforcement, followed by Bartemius Crouch from International Cooperation. Umbridge's smile tightened fractionally. But Minister, protocol dictates, protocol can be adjusted when circumstances require it. Minerva sat down, removing her pointed hat and placing it on the desk. I'd also like to see the personnel files for all department heads and their immediate deputies by noon. All of them? Umbridge's girlish voice rose slightly. But that's dozens of files, and some of them contain sensitive, I am the Minister for Magic, Ms. Umbridge. Minerva's tone was even but firm. I believe that grants me the appropriate clearance. Noon will be sufficient time, I think. For a moment, something ugly flashed in Umbridge's eyes before her smile returned, wider than ever. Of course, Minister. I'll see to it personally. Is there anything else you require? Tea would be welcome. Earl Grey, if available. Minerva opened a drawer, finding it empty. And I'll need quills, parchment, and the most recent security reports from all departments. Right away, Minister. Umbridge moved toward the door with small, quick steps. Oh, and Lucius Malfoy has requested a brief audience at your earliest convenience. He was most supportive of your appointment. I'm sure he was, Minerva replied dryly. Please inform Mr. Malfoy that I'll consider his request once I've settled more pressing matters. After Umbridge left, closing the door with a soft click, Minerva allowed herself a moment to absorb the reality of her situation. The weight of the wizarding world's governance now rested on her shoulders. Somewhere out there, the remains of Voldemort's followers were watching, waiting. And if Albus's suspicions were correct, the Dark Lord himself might not be as gone as everyone hoped. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Enter, she called, straightening in her chair. Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, strode in. Square-jawed and monocled, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had earned her position through merit rather than connections. Minister, she said with a nod that was respectful without being deferential. You wanted to see me first. Yes, Amelia. Please sit. Minerva gestured to the chair opposite. We have much to discuss about the state of our aura forces. Amelia sat, her expression grave. I won't mince words, Minister. We're understaffed, undertrained, and unprepared for any significant threat. Budget cuts after the war left us scrambling to maintain basic operations. And the Azkaban situation? Dementors remain in place, but we have minimal human oversight. Just enough to maintain the wards and process the occasional new prisoner. Amelia adjusted her monocle. If you're worried about security, I'm worried about everything, Amelia. Minerva leaned forward. But let's start with something specific. What do you know about the whereabouts of Sirius Black? Amelia's eyebrows rose. Black? He's in maximum security, has been for nearly a decade. Cell checks are performed monthly. And when was the last time anyone actually spoke with him? Interrogated him properly? Not since his initial incarceration, I believe. Amelia frowned. Why the sudden interest in Black? Minerva was silent for a moment, considering. Because something about his case has always troubled me. No trial, no Veritaserum testimony, just a rushed conviction in the chaos after the Potters' deaths. You think he might be innocent? Amelia looked skeptical. I think proper procedure wasn't followed. Minerva's voice was firm. And I think that's a pattern we can no longer afford in this ministry. I want a complete review of all major cases from the war, particularly those that were processed without full trials. That will ruffle feathers, Minister. Particularly among those who pushed those convictions through. Let them ruffle. Minerva's eyes flashed. I'm also authorizing an immediate 20% increase to your operational budget, effective immediately. Amelia's eyes widened. That's significant. The Wisengamot will approve it once they understand the security implications. Minerva stood and moved to a side table where a large map of Britain was displayed. I want increased patrols in these areas. She pointed to several locations. Particularly around Little Hangleton, Yorkshire. That's an odd choice. Nothing there but a small Muggle village. It's Tom Riddle's ancestral home. At Amelia's blank look, Minerva clarified, Voldemort. His birth name was Tom Riddle. Amelia couldn't quite suppress her flinch at the name. You think there might be Death Eater activity there? I think we need to be vigilant about locations with personal significance to him. Minerva returned to her desk. I also want increased security for Harry Potter. Discreetly, of course. The boy who lived. But he's with Muggles, protected by Dumbledore's arrangements, which have worked so far, but we should not be complacent. Minerva tapped her fingers on the desk. He'll be returning to our world soon, and that may draw attention we'd prefer to avoid. A soft knock interrupted them, and Umbridge entered with a tea service. Your tea, Minister. Oh. Madam Bones, I didn't realize you'd already arrived. Our minister is certainly eager to dive right in, isn't she? The false sweetness in her voice was cloying. Thank you, Ms. Umbridge. That will be all for now. Minerva dismissed her with a nod. After Umbridge had left, Amelia leaned forward. Watch that one, Minister. She has her fingers in more pies than a baker on Samhain. I'm well aware. Minerva poured tea for both of them. Now, tell me about Alastor Moody's retirement. I'm thinking we might need his expertise a bit longer. The Great Hall at Hogwarts buzzed with anticipation as students filed in for the start-of-term feast. The enchanted ceiling reflected a clear night sky, stars twinkling against velvety blackness. Candles floated overhead, their warm glow illuminating four long house tables where returning students settled in, greeting friends and sharing summer stories. At the high table, Severus Snape sat in the central headmaster's chair, his sallow face impassive as he surveyed the hall. To his right sat a squat witch with iron-grey hair and yellow eyes, Madame Hooch, now serving as deputy headmistress. To his left, a new face, a nervous-looking young man with a purple turban wrapped around his head. The doors to the great hall swung open, and Professor Flitwick led in a line of wide-eyed first-years. Among them, a skinny boy with untidy black hair and round glasses walked beside a tall, gangly redhead. Harry Potter's gaze darted around the magnificent hall, taking in the floating candles, the golden plates, and the curious stares of older students. "It's really him," whispered a third-year Hufflepuff, not quite quietly enough. "Harry Potter." The whispers spread like wildfire. Harry kept his eyes fixed ahead, trying to ignore the pointing and murmuring. "Blimey, this is mental," Ron Weasley muttered beside him. "You'd think they'd never seen a new student before." "They've never seen me before," Harry replied under his breath. "I wish they'd stop staring." From the Slytherin table, a pale boy with slick-back blonde hair watched Harry with calculating eyes. Draco Malfoy had already attempted to introduce himself on the train, an encounter that had left both boys with a poor impression of the other. Professor Flitwick placed a three-legged stool at the front of the hall, then carefully balanced the ancient sorting hat upon it. The hall fell silent as a rip near the hat's brim opened wide like a mouth, and it began to sing, "Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see, I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me." As the hat sang about the four houses and their qualities, Harry found his attention drawn to the high table. Headmaster Snape was watching the proceedings with an expression of barely concealed boredom. When his dark eyes briefly met Harry's, the boy felt a strange sensation, almost like a prickle of recognition, quickly followed by distaste. "When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted," Professor Flitwick announced in his squeaky voice once the hat had finished. "Abbott, Hannah." A pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of line and put on the hat, which fell right down over her eyes. After a moment's pause, "Hufflepuff," shouted the hat. The table on the right cheered as Hannah went to sit down among the Hufflepuffs. As the sorting continued, Harry's nervousness increased. What if he wasn't chosen for any house? What if the hat just said there had been a mistake and he should go back to the Dursleys? Granger, Hermione. The bushy-haired girl Harry had met on the train nearly ran to the stool and jammed the hat eagerly on her head. Gryffindor, shouted the hat after nearly a full minute of deliberation. Ron groaned beside Harry. The sorting continued until finally, Potter, Harry. As Harry stepped forward, whispers broke out again all over the hall. "Potter, did he say? The Harry Potter?" The last thing Harry saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was the hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. Next second he was looking at the black inside of the hat. Said a small voice in his ear. "Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a nice thirst to prove yourself, now that's interesting. So where shall I put you?" Harry gripped the edges of the stool and thought, not Slytherin, not Slytherin. "Not Slytherin, said the small voice. "Are you sure? You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that." Harry continued his silent plea, "Not Slytherin, please." "Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor." Harry heard the hat shout the last word to the whole hall. He took off the hat and walked shakily toward the Gryffindor table, where he was greeted by enthusiastic cheers and handshakes. As he sat down, he caught sight of Headmaster Snape watching him with an unreadable expression. The sorting concluded with Zabini, Blaze, being made a Slytherin. Professor Flitwick rolled up his scroll and took the sorting hat away as Headmaster Snape got to his feet. The hall fell silent. "Welcome," Snape said, his voice carrying effortlessly despite its quiet tone. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our feast, I have a few, necessary words." His dark eyes swept over the student body, lingering briefly on the Gryffindor table. "First years should note that the forest on the grounds is forbidden to all pupils. A few of our older students would do well to remember that as well. His gaze flicked toward the Weasley twins, who smiled innocently back. Mr. Filch, our caretaker, has asked me to remind you that no magic should be used between classes in the corridors. Quidditch trials will be held in the second week of term. Anyone interested in playing for their house teams should contact Madam Hooch. Snape's lip curled slightly. And finally, I must inform you that this year, the third-floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a most painful death. A few students laughed, but most, including Harry, looked unsettled. Is he serious? Harry muttered to Percy Weasley. Must be, Percy replied, frowning. It's odd, though. He'd usually give a reason why we're not allowed to go somewhere. The forest's full of dangerous creatures, everyone knows that. I would have expected him to tell us prefects, at least. And now, Snape continued, his voice dropping even lower, forcing students to strain to hear him, I have been instructed to share news that would typically be beneath the dignity of this ancient institution to announce. He paused, seeming to find the next words distasteful. As many of you are aware, Professor McGonagall, who has taught Transfiguration at this school for over 3 decades, has been appointed Minister for Magic. While her political career is not our concern, her absence necessitates changes to our staff. Snape gestured to the turbaned man beside him. Professor Quirrell, previously our Muggle Studies teacher, has generously agreed to take on the role of Transfiguration Master, having demonstrated adequate competence in the subject. Quirrell gave a nervous smile and half-waved to the students. Additionally, Snape continued, Professor Quirrell's former position will be filled by Professor Charity Burbage, and defense against the dark arts will be taught by Professor Remus Lupin, who will arrive tomorrow due to unavoidable personal circumstances. At this last announcement, whispers broke out again. The Weasley twins exchanged puzzled looks. Lupin? George whispered. Dad's mentioned him before. Was in the order with our uncles, I think. Before Harry could ask what the order meant, Snape clapped his hands once, sharply, and the tables suddenly filled with food. The feast had begun. As Harry helped himself to roast potatoes, he found himself wondering about the changes that had occurred before he'd even arrived. Who was this Professor McGonagall who had become important enough to leave Hogwarts? And why did Headmaster Snape seem to look at him with such barely concealed dislike? Little did he know that at that very moment, in the minister's office in London, Minerva McGonagall was reviewing a file labeled, Potter, Harry James, Security Protocols, preparing for the possibility that the boy who lived might need protection sooner than anyone anticipated. The minister's office was quiet save for the soft ticking of an ornate clock and the occasional rustle of parchment. Minerva had dismissed her staff hours ago, but work remained. She'd always been one to burn the midnight oil, a habit formed during decades of grading essays late into the night. A soft knock at her door broke the silence. Enter, she called, not looking up from the security report she was reading. Albus Dumbledore swept in, his midnight blue robe spangled with silver stars. Working late, Minister. Some habits are difficult to break, it seems. Minerva finally looked up, allowing herself a small smile. Albus. I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. The sorting concluded earlier than anticipated. Dumbledore conjured a comfortable armchair across from her desk and sat down. Severus managed to keep his welcoming speech mercifully brief, though not without a few pointed remarks. I can imagine. Minerva removed her reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. How was Harry? Sorted into Gryffindor, as I suspect you anticipated. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. He seems to have already formed a friendship with young Ronald Weasley. That's good. The Weasleys are a solid family. Minerva gestured to a tea service that immediately began preparing 2 cups. And Severus? Is he managing? As well as can be expected. Dumbledore accepted his cup with a nod of thanks. He maintains his customary demeanor, though I notice he's already placed Remus in the defense position rather than taking it for himself. That was a condition of his appointment, Minerva reminded him. Along with treating all students fairly, regardless of house affiliation. Yes, and I believe he will adhere to the letter of that agreement, if not always its spirit. Dumbledore sipped his tea. But we didn't come here to discuss Severus. You've made progress already, I see. He gestured to the stacks of files on her desk. Some. I've authorized budget increases for magical law enforcement and initiated reviews of several wartime convictions. Minerva's expression grew serious. Including Sirius Black's. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. That's a delicate matter, Minerva. It's a matter of justice, Albus. No Veritaserum, no pensive memories examined, not even a proper trial. She tapped a thick file. Just Barty Crouch's word and a street full of dead muggles. Something doesn't add up. What makes you say that? Sirius was James Potter's best friend. His brother in all but blood. Minerva shook her head. I taught that boy for 7 years. His loyalty to his friends was absolute. People change, Minerva. Especially in war. Perhaps. She wasn't convinced. But I've authorized Amelia Bones to conduct a proper interview with Black using Veritaserum. If he's guilty, we'll know for certain. Dumbledore stroked his beard thoughtfully. And if he's innocent? Then a grave injustice has been done. Minerva's voice was firm. And I will correct it, regardless of political fallout. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past and future hanging between them. There's something else, Minerva said finally. Reports of unusual magical activity in Albania. Disappearances, dead unicorns, whispers of a dark presence. Albania, Dumbledore repeated softly. Where the diadem was hidden. You think it's him? Trying to return. It fits with what I've been able to piece together. Dumbledore's expression was grave. He's without a body, but not without power. Seeking a way back. Then we need to be ready. Minerva pushed aside the files and pulled forward a fresh piece of parchment. I'm reopening the Order of the Phoenix, Albus. Officially, as a special ministry task force. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. That's a significant step, Minerva. The Order was always meant to operate outside official channels. And how well did that serve us last time? Minerva's voice was sharp. We need resources, Albus. Intelligence. The full weight of the ministry behind us. There are risks to legitimizing the Order. Infiltration, political interference, risks I'm prepared to manage. Minerva dipped her quill and began to write. I'm appointing you as special advisor to the minister on matters of magical security. That will give you the authority to rebuild the Order as you see fit, with ministry backing. Dumbledore watched her for a long moment. You've taken to political maneuvering rather quickly, Minerva. She looked up, a glint of steel in her eyes. I've spent decades watching students try to circumvent rules, Albus. Politics isn't so different, just higher stakes and fewer detentions. A smile spread slowly across Dumbledore's face. Indeed. Very well, I accept the position. Good. Now, about these Horcruxes you mentioned. Minerva pulled forward another file. I've had the Unspeakables researching them discreetly. The findings are disturbing. You've told the Unspeakables about Voldemort's Horcruxes. Alarm tinged Dumbledore's voice. Not specifically, no. I simply authorized research into the general concept and methods of detection. Minerva fixed him with a stern look. We need to find them all, Albus. And we need to do it before he finds a way to return to power. Dumbledore nodded slowly. I've been pursuing several leads. The diary, the ring, the locket, the cup, the diadem, and something else, something I haven't identified yet. 6. Minerva looked horrified. He split his soul into 6 pieces. 7. including the peace that remains in whatever form he currently exists. Dumbledore's expression was grim. It's unprecedented. No dark wizard has ever gone so far. All the more reason to act quickly. Minerva rolled up the parchment she'd been writing on. I'll have this formalized by morning. The Order of the Phoenix will rise again, Albus, but this time, we'll have the full force of magical law behind us. As Dumbledore took his leave, Minerva returned to her work with renewed purpose. The wizarding world had grown complacent in the decades since Voldemort's disappearance. That complacency ended now. In her mind's eye, she could see Harry Potter as she'd last glimpsed him, a baby with a lightning scar, being carried away from the ruins of Godric's Hollow. The boy deserved a chance at life without the shadow of Voldemort hanging over him. And she would do everything in her power to give him that chance. Minister McGonagall picked up her quill and continued writing long into the night. Chapter 2, Shadows Rising. Lucius Malfoy's silver-tipped cane clicked against the polished marble floor of the ministry atrium. He nodded curtly to those who greeted him, his cold eyes barely acknowledging their existence. The past year under McGonagall's leadership had been difficult. His generous donations no longer guaranteed the political access he'd once enjoyed. Appointments with the minister herself were frustratingly rare and closely monitored. Today, however, was different. Today he had leverage. Lucius adjusted the leather-bound diary tucked inside his robes. The Dark Lord had entrusted it to him years ago, a treasure to be protected at all costs. But with increasing raids on the homes of former Death Eaters and whispers of the minister's hunt for dark artifacts, perhaps the time had come to put it to use. Mr. Malfoy greeted the minister's secretary, a sharp-eyed witch who'd replaced Umbridge in the position 3 months prior. The minister will see you shortly. Please wait here. Lucius inclined his head and settled into a chair, noting how the waiting area outside the minister's office had changed. Gone were the plush furnishings and ornate decorations, replaced by practical, comfortable seating and walls lined with bookshelves. Typical McGonagall, function over form, substance over style. The door to the inner office opened, and Amelia Bones emerged, nodding briskly to Lucius before striding away. Lucius stood as Minerva McGonagall appeared in the doorway. Mr. Malfoy, she said, her Scottish accent crisp. Do come in. Her office, too, had transformed since she'd taken over. Maps of Britain and Europe adorned one wall, marked with colored pins whose significance Lucius could only guess at. A large pensive cabinet stood in one corner. The massive minister's desk remained, but was now covered with neatly organized stacks of parchment rather than decorative trinkets. Minister, Lucius said with a practiced smile. Thank you for seeing me. I know how busy you've been. Indeed. Minerva returned to her seat, gesturing for him to do the same. Your request mentioned concerns about the upcoming school year at Hogwarts. Your son Draco will be entering his 2nd year, correct? Yes, and thriving under Headmaster Snape's leadership. Lucius leaned his cane against his chair. Though that is not my primary concern. I've heard disturbing rumors about the school's security arrangements. Minerva's eyebrows rose slightly. Hogwarts remains one of the safest places in magical Britain, Mr. Malfoy. And yet last year saw a troll in the dungeons, a 3-headed dog guarding a highly coveted magical artifact, and an attempted theft of said artifact by a professor possessed by the spirit of the Dark Lord. Lucius's smile thinned. Hardly reassuring for concerned parents. A flicker of surprise crossed Minerva's face before she masked it. You seem remarkably well informed about matters the ministry has worked to keep confidential. I have my sources, Lucius replied smoothly. Just as I have sources suggesting that the Board of Governors is dissatisfied with certain aspects of Hogwarts' current administration. I see. Minerva's voice cooled several degrees. And you're here to convey their dissatisfaction? Merely to express concerns. Lucius spread his hands in a placating gesture. The safety of our children must be paramount. If the current leadership cannot ensure that safety, perhaps changes should be considered. Are you threatening Headmaster Snape's position, Mr. Malfoy? Not at all. Lucius's smile didn't reach his eyes. Severus has my complete support. I merely suggest that additional oversight might be beneficial. Perhaps through a more active role for the Board of Governors. I see. Minerva studied him for a long moment. And what would this active role entail? Regular inspections. Review of staff appointments. Greater input on security measures. Lucius leaned forward slightly. After all, we wouldn't want another incident like Professor Quirrell's unfortunate possession. Indeed not. Minerva's face remained impassive. And in return for bringing these concerns to my attention? Lucius smiled. She understood the game, at least. The educational reforms you've proposed to the Wisingamat have faced considerable opposition, I believe. Perhaps that opposition might soften with the right assurances regarding Hogwarts governance. Minerva leaned back in her chair. You're offering to support my proposed expansion of Muggle studies and the introduction of wizarding culture classes for Muggleborn students in exchange for giving the board more control over Hogwarts. A crude simplification, but essentially correct. Lucius inclined his head. And if I decline? Then the board may feel compelled to act independently. Lucius's voice hardened. We do have the authority to suspend the headmaster under certain circumstances. Minerva was silent for a long moment. Then, to Lucius's surprise, she smiled thinly. Mr. Malfoy, I appreciate your candor. However, you seem to have overlooked several crucial details. She opened a drawer and withdrew a rolled parchment. As of this morning, I have signed an executive order restructuring the Hogwarts Board of Governors. Lucius stiffened. You have no authority. As Minister for Magic, I have every authority to ensure that educational oversight is free from political manipulation. Minerva unrolled the parchment. The board will now include equal representation from all 4 houses, term limits for all members, and a prohibition on those with certain historical affiliations. Lucius's knuckles whitened on the handle of his cane. You dare. Furthermore, Minerva continued as if he hadn't spoken, an anonymous source has provided evidence suggesting that several current board members, including yourself, have used threats and intimidation to influence Hogwarts policy in the past. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement is investigating these allegations as we speak. This is outrageous, Lucius hissed, his mask of civility slipping. The Wisingamat will never stand for such. The Wisingamat approved the restructuring this morning, Mr. Malfoy. In fact, your son's future father-in-law, Mr. Greengrass, was quite supportive. Minerva allowed herself a small, tight smile. He seemed particularly concerned about rumors that someone might attempt to introduce dangerous dark artifacts into the school this year. Lucius felt the diary grow suddenly heavy within his robes. What are you implying, Minister? Nothing at all. Minerva rolled up the parchment. Merely that Hogwarts security is indeed my highest priority, which is why Aurors will be conducting random inspections of all parcels and possessions entering the school this year, with particular attention to family heirlooms of unusual magical properties. For a moment, Lucius could only stare at her, rage building behind his carefully controlled expression. She had outmaneuvered him completely. Now, Minerva said, rising from her chair, unless there's something else, I have another appointment. Lucius stood, every muscle tense with fury. This isn't over, Minister. Oh, I rather think it is, Mr. Malfoy. Minerva's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. At least regarding Hogwarts. Though I would welcome your support for the educational reforms, they would benefit all students, including your son. Lucius swept from the office without another word, his mind racing. The diary would need to be hidden elsewhere, somewhere beyond the ministry's reach. Perhaps the Weasley girl, starting her first year at Hogwarts. Her father's recent raids on dark wizarding homes made the family a satisfying target, and a blood trader vessel for the Dark Lord's work would be poetic justice. Yes, Lucius thought as he strode through the atrium. McGonagall may have won this skirmish, but the war was far from over. Harry Potter slid into a seat beside Ron at the Gryffindor table, his hair still damp from Quidditch practice. His second year at Hogwarts had started with a peculiar incident. A house elf named Dobby had appeared in his bedroom at Privet Drive, warning him not to return to school. When Harry had insisted he must return, the elf had caused a catastrophe with Aunt Petunia's pudding. The strangest part, however, had been the aftermath. Instead of the expected letter threatening expulsion for underage magic, an actual ministry official had appeared at the Dursleys' door. The witch, Madame Hopkirk from the improper use of magic office, had quickly determined that the magic wasn't Harry's and had departed after a brief, stern conversation with his aunt and uncle. Harry had later learned that this proactive approach to magical incidents in Muggle areas was one of Minister McGonagall's new policies. "Blimey, you look knackered," Ron observed, pushing a plate of shepherd's pie toward Harry. "Woodworking you hard?" "Brutal practice," Harry confirmed, scooping up a forkful. "He's obsessed with winning the cup this year." "Better eat up then," Hermione said without looking up from her massive ancient runes textbook. "We've got Professor Lupin's practical defense lesson after lunch." Harry grinned at the mention of defense against the dark arts. Professor Lupin had quickly become his favorite teacher, knowledgeable, patient, and with a quiet sense of humor that made even the most nervous students comfortable. "Did you hear about Malfoy's dad?" Ron asked, lowering his voice. "Percy says he's been kicked off the school governor's board. Dad reckons Minister McGonagall herself ordered it." "Good," Harry said firmly, remembering how Draco had spent the first weeks of term bragging about his father's influence. "Maybe Malfoy will stop strutting around like he owns the place now." Hermione finally closed her book. "It's part of the minister's educational reforms. My parents received a whole packet about it over the summer, explaining changes to the curriculum and governance structure." "My dad says she's making enemies," Ron said, reaching for more pumpkin juice. "Lot of the old pureblood families aren't happy with her pushing for more Muggle-related studies and stricter oversight on the Board of Governors." Harry was about to respond when a commotion at the Hufflepuff table caught his attention. Justin Finch-Fletchley was standing rigid, his face pale as parchment, staring at something on the floor beside him. "Snake." The boy stammered, pointing at a small green garden snake that had somehow found its way into the Great Hall. Several students shrieked and jumped onto benches. Professor Flitwick hurried over from the staff table, wand drawn. Before he could vanish the reptile, however, Harry found himself moving forward, oddly drawn to the confused creature. "It's okay," he said to the snake, not noticing the sudden silence that fell across the hall. "You're scaring everyone. Let me help you outside." The snake raised its head, seeming to understand. "Thank you, Speaker," it hissed. Harry blinked in surprise. "You're welcome," he replied automatically. The silence in the hall deepened. Harry looked up to find every face turned toward him, expressions ranging from shock to fear. Even Ron and Hermione were staring at him as though he'd grown a second head. "What?" Harry asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You're a Parselmouth," Ron said, his voice hushed but carrying in the silent hall. "You can talk to snakes." Professor Flitwick cleared his throat. "Mr. Potter, perhaps you could escort our uninvited guest outside?" "Gently, if you please." Still bewildered by everyone's reaction, Harry coaxed the snake onto his hand and carried it out of the Great Hall, acutely aware of the whispers that erupted in his wake. In the entrance hall, he nearly collided with Headmaster Snape, who was striding in from the grounds, his black robes billowing. "Potter," Snape said, his dark eyes taking in the snake in Harry's hand. "Adopting pets now, are we?" "No, sir," Harry replied quickly. "It got into the Great Hall somehow. I'm just taking it outside." Snape studied him for a long moment. "You spoke to it?" "In Parseltongue." "I didn't know that's what I was doing," Harry said defensively. "I didn't even know it had a name." "The snake just understood me." "Indeed." Snape's expression was unreadable. A rare gift, Parseltongue. One most commonly associated with Slytherin, Harry finished, suddenly understanding everyone's reaction. With Salazar Slytherin. And his descendants. Snape's voice lowered. Including the Dark Lord himself. Harry felt a chill run down his spine. But, I can't be, related to Salazar Slytherin. Snape raised an eyebrow. The Potter family is old, but not that old, nor particularly connected to Slytherin's line. Then why can I speak Parseltongue? For a moment, something almost like concern flickered across Snape's sallow features. That, Potter, is a question best addressed to the headmaster of Hogwarts, and perhaps the Minister for Magic. Before Harry could ask what he meant, Snape gestured to the front doors. I suggest you return your slithering friend to its natural habitat before your classmates' imaginations run even more rampant. As Harry hurried to comply, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just occurred, something beyond a simple conversation with a snake. Later that evening, after enduring hours of whispers and stares from his fellow students, Harry found himself summoned to Headmaster Snape's office. To his surprise, Professor Lupin was waiting there as well, along with an unfamiliar witch in formal robes bearing the Ministry of Magic insignia. Mr. Potter, Snape said without preamble. This is Madame Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. She wishes to speak with you about this afternoon's incident. Harry's heart sank. Was speaking Parseltongue some kind of crime? There's nothing to fear, Harry, Professor Lupin said gently, noticing his expression. Madame Bones is here at the minister's request, as a precaution. Precaution against what? Harry asked. Madame Bones stepped forward, her monocle glinting in the lamplight. Mr. Potter, are you aware that there have been incidents at Hogwarts recently? Messages written on walls, warnings about a chamber of secrets being opened. Harry frowned. I heard some Hufflepuffs talking about graffiti near the second-floor girls' bathroom, but I thought it was just a prank. It appears to be more than that. Bones exchanged a glance with Snape. A student's cat was found petrified 2 days ago, along with a message warning that enemies of the air should beware. And now I'm speaking to snakes, so everyone thinks I'm this bear. Harry felt a surge of indignation. That's ridiculous. I didn't even know I could speak Parseltongue until today. We are not accusing you of anything, Mr. Potter, Snape said, his tone surprisingly even. In fact, the timing of your revelation may be fortuitous. What do you mean? Lupin moved to stand beside Harry. The Chamber of Secrets is said to be the home of a monster that only the heir of Slytherin can control, likely a serpent of some kind. If someone is claiming to be the heir and has opened the chamber, your ability might help us locate it. Harry looked between the adults, confused. But why would anyone want to open a secret chamber and attack cats? Because the chamber's monster wasn't intended for cats, Mr. Potter, Madame Bones said gravely. According to legend, Salazar Slytherin built the chamber to house a creature that would purge the school of those he considered unworthy to study magic. Muggleborns, Harry realized, thinking immediately of Hermione. But, that's horrible. Indeed, Snape agreed dryly. And now someone appears to be following in Slytherin's footsteps, or wishes us to believe they are. Madame Bones straightened. The minister has authorized me to place a small team of Aurors at Hogwarts as a precautionary measure. They will be discreet, disguised as additional staff or visitors, but they will be watching for any suspicious activity. What about Harry? Lupin asked. If word of his ability spreads beyond Hogwarts, it already has, Bones admitted. Which is why the minister has also authorized me to provide Mr. Potter with a direct communication method. She withdrew a small mirror from her robes. This is a two-way mirror, linked to one in my office. If you encounter anything unusual, or if you feel threatened in any way, simply speak my name into it. Harry accepted the mirror, turning it over in his hands. Thank you. The minister is taking this situation very seriously, Mr. Potter. Bones adjusted her monocle. She remembers the last time the chamber was allegedly opened, 50 years ago. A student died. She is determined to prevent history from repeating itself. After Madame Bones departed, Professor Lupin insisted on escorting Harry back to Gryffindor Tower. As they walked the quiet corridors, Harry couldn't contain his questions any longer. "Professor, why can I speak Parseltongue? Headmaster Snape said I'm not related to Slytherin." Lupin hesitated before answering. "There are theories, Harry. Nothing certain. Is it because of this?" Harry pushed his fringe aside, revealing his lightning scar. "Because of what happened when Voldemort tried to kill me?" Lupin flinched slightly at the name but nodded. "That's one possibility. Dumbledore believes that when the killing curse rebounded, it may have transferred some of Voldemort's powers to you. So I have a piece of Voldemort in me." The idea made Harry feel sick. "No, Harry." Lupin's voice was firm. "You have your own abilities, your own strength. Whatever happened that night, it didn't change who you are." He smiled sadly. "Your parents would be proud of the young man you're becoming, regardless of whether you can talk to snakes." "You knew my parents?" Harry asked eagerly. "I did." Lupin's eyes grew distant with memory. "Your father was one of my best friends. We were in the same year at Hogwarts, along with Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew." "Sirius Black? Isn't he the one who—" Harry stopped, remembering the Daily Prophet articles from the summer. "Who was wrongfully imprisoned for 13 years. Lupin's smile was bitter. "Yes. Minister McGonagall ordered his case reviewed last year. Under Veritasrum questioning, it was discovered that Peter Pettigrew was the true secret keeper for your parents, and the one who betrayed them to Voldemort. So this Pettigrew person is the one who got my parents killed?" Harry felt a surge of anger. "Where is he now?" "That's the problem," Lupin said grimly. "No one knows. When Sirius confronted him after your parents' deaths, Peter faked his own death, killed 12 Muggles in the process, and disappeared. He's been in hiding ever since." "And Black? What happened to him after they found out he was innocent?" "He's recovering at St. Mungo's." Lupin's expression darkened. 13 years in Azkaban, it takes a toll, Harry. But he's asked about you. When he's better, perhaps you could meet him. He is your godfather, after all." Harry stopped walking, stunned. "My godfather? I have a godfather?" Lupin seemed to realize he'd said more than he intended. "Yes, but perhaps this isn't the best time to discuss it. You've had quite enough revelations for one day, I think." They had reached the portrait of the fat lady. Before giving the password, Harry turned to his professor. "Do you think whoever's opening the chamber will try to hurt Muggle-born students? People like Hermione?" Lupin's face grew serious. "I don't know, Harry. But with the Ministry's involvement and the Aurors on site, Hogwarts is much safer than it would have been otherwise." He squeezed Harry's shoulder. "Try not to worry too much. Focus on your studies and Quidditch. Let the adults handle this." But as Harry entered the common room, finding it suddenly quiet as his fellow Gryffindors turned to stare at him, he knew that wouldn't be possible. Whatever was happening with the Chamber of Secrets, he was somehow connected to it, whether he wanted to be or not. Dolores Umbridge dabbed at the corners of her mouth with a pink lace handkerchief, her wide smile fixed firmly in place as she regarded the wizard seated across from her in the private room at the Silver Serpent, an exclusive restaurant in Wizarding London favored by pure-blood society. "Another glass of wine, Mr. Knott," she offered, gesturing to the half-empty bottle of expensive elf-made wine between them. Thaddeus Knott, a gaunt man with penetrating eyes, declined with a slight shake of his head. "Let us dispense with pleasantries, Madame Umbridge. You said you had a proposition that would interest me." Direct as always, Umbridge gave a girlish giggle that didn't match her squat, toad-like appearance. "Very well. As you know, I served as senior undersecretary to Minister Bagnold, and briefly to our current, administration. Her pause conveyed volumes of disapproval without saying anything that could be considered disloyal. McGonagall replaced you with that half-blood Weasley boy, not observed. After your disagreement about werewolf legislation, wasn't it? Percy Weasley is merely a symptom of a greater disease, Umbridge replied, her girlish voice hardening. The minister seems determined to dismantle the very foundations of our society. First, releasing that murderer Black without proper trial, he had veritaserum questioning, I believe. Administered under questionable circumstances, Umbridge sniffed. Then these so-called educational reforms. Mandatory Muggle studies. Reduced influence for the Board of Governors. And now, these rumors of a special task force investigating artifacts from the last war. Knott's eyes narrowed. What sort of artifacts? Items of significant magical heritage, Umbridge said carefully. Items that certain families might have preserved for their historical and cultural value. I see. Knott's fingers drummed once on the table. And your proposition? Umbridge leaned forward, lowering her voice. An alliance, Mr. Knott. Between those of us who value tradition and proper wizarding pride. The minister may have the public's ear for now, but her position is more precarious than it appears. Go on. I have connections throughout the ministry, people who are, shall we say, sympathetic to our concerns. With the right pressure applied in the right places, we could make McGonagall's reforms impossible to implement. And if she pushes back? Knott asked. She's not known for yielding easily. Umbridge's smile widened, revealing unnaturally pointed teeth. Then we create circumstances that force her hand. The wizarding public is fickle, Mr. Knott. Today's respected minister is tomorrow's disgraced failure, given the right scandal. What sort of scandal did you have in mind? Nothing definite yet, Umbridge demurred. Though these disturbances at Hogwarts present interesting possibilities. A school in danger, children at risk. And a minister who placed an untested potions master in charge rather than a more qualified candidate. Snape has Dumbledore's support, Knott pointed out. Ah, but does he have the support of parents? Particularly if more incidents occur. Umbridge sipped her wine delicately. And what of the Potter boy? Speaking Parseltongue, connected somehow to these chamber rumors, yet receiving special treatment and protection from the minister herself. Knott studied her for a long moment. You're suggesting we use these events at Hogwarts against McGonagall? I merely observe that circumstances, properly contextualized, can shape public opinion. Umbridge's voice was honey-sweet. Particularly with allies in the press. My dear friend Rita Skeeter, for instance, has been most interested in the minister's unorthodox priorities. And what do you want from me, specifically? Your influence, Mr. Knott. Your connections with certain families who share our concerns. Umbridge's eyes gleamed. And perhaps, when the time is right, your voice in the Wisengamot calling for a vote of no confidence. Knott leaned back, considering. And if I agree to this alliance? What assurances do I have that my family's interests will be protected? When McGonagall falls, and she will fall, someone must be ready to step into her place. Umbridge's smile became predatory. Someone with the right perspective on blood status and tradition. Someone willing to reward those who helped them ascend. Someone like you, I presume. I would be honored to serve the wizarding community in such a capacity, Umbridge simpered, false modesty dripping from every word. With the support of respected families like yours. Knott was silent for a long moment. Then he raised his glass. To new alliances, Madame Umbridge. And to a future where proper wizarding values are once again respected. As they clinked glasses, neither noticed the nondescript wizard reading a newspaper in the corner booth, who had been carefully monitoring their conversation through a modified extendable ear, a new invention being tested by the Auror office as part of Minister McGonagall's enhanced security protocols. Minerva McGonagall stood at the edge of a small, murky pond in the Yorkshire countryside, her wand casting a soft light in the gathering dusk. Beside her, Albus Dumbledore knelt at the water's edge, his sleeve rolled up as he traced complex patterns over the surface with his wand. "Are you certain this is the place, Albus?" Minerva asked, scanning their surroundings with a practiced eye. The dilapidated shack nearby exuded an aura of malevolence that made her skin crawl. "As certain as I can be," Dumbledore replied, not looking up from his work. "The magical signature matches what we found in the diary Lucius Malfoy attempted to smuggle into Hogwarts." Minerva's lips thinned at the mention of the diary. Thanks to enhanced security measures at Hogwarts, Aurors had intercepted it before it could reach its intended recipient, Ginny Weasley, according to their intelligence. Analysis by the Unspeakables had revealed its true nature, a Horcrux containing a fragment of Tom Riddle's soul. The diary now rested in a heavily warded box at the Department of Mysteries, intact but contained while they researched methods of destruction. "It's curious," Dumbledore continued, still working on the pond. "Tom always had a fascination with significant magical locations. The Gaunt Shack, the sea cave where he tormented his fellow orphans. He hid pieces of his soul in places that held meaning for him." "Meaning or power?" Minerva asked. "This area has old magic in it. I can feel it." "Both, perhaps." Dumbledore straightened suddenly. "There. I believe I've bypassed the protective enchantments." The surface of the pond began to glow with an eerie greenish light. Shapes moved beneath it, not fish, but something metallic catching Dumbledore's wand light. "Is that Salazar Slytherin's locket?" Dumbledore confirmed. "Another Horcrux, hidden beneath protective potions that would cause agonizing pain to anyone who attempted to reach it by conventional means." "And your solution is unconventional, I presume?" Minerva raised an eyebrow. "Indeed." Dumbledore stepped back and made a complex motion with his wand. The pond water began to rise in a column, separating itself from whatever lay at the bottom. A variation on the drought charm, combined with an element of containment. "The potion remains suspended, while we retrieve what lies beneath." As the liquid hovered in midair, Minerva could see a heavy golden locket resting on the muddy pond bottom, emblazoned with an ornate letter, S. "Allow me," she said, casting a careful levitation charm to raise the locket without touching it. It rose slowly, dripping mud, and hovered between them. Even from a distance, Minerva could feel the malevolence radiating from it, a cold, insidious sensation that made her think of Dementors. "Two down," Dumbledore murmured as Minerva guided the locket into an enchanted container similar to the one holding the diary. "4 to go, if my calculations are correct." "And the cup?" Minerva asked, securing the container. "You mentioned it might be in a Gringotts vault." "Bellatrix Lestrange's vault, specifically." Dumbledore frowned. "That presents unique challenges. The goblins are unlikely to cooperate with a search based solely on our suspicions." "Leave the goblins to me," Minerva said firmly. "I've been working on improved relations since taking office. A recent agreement to review cursed artifacts in high-security vaults may provide an opening." "Carefully done, Minerva." There was approval in Dumbledore's voice. Tom never appreciated the power of cooperation. He saw it as weakness. "His mistake," Minerva said grimly, pocketing the contained locket. "Speaking of cooperation, what news from Remus regarding Sirius?" "Improving daily," Dumbledore replied as they began walking back toward their apparition point. "The mind healers at St. Mungo's have made remarkable progress. He's now lucid most days, though the nights remain difficult." "And Peter Pettigrew?" "Still no sign, I'm afraid. Though with Sirius's testimony and the new evidence, the Auror office has made his capture a priority." They walked in silence for a moment, each lost in their thoughts. The night was clear, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "What of young Harry?" Minerva asked finally. "These incidents at Hogwarts, the Parseltongue ability. I worry, Albus." Dumbledore's pace slowed. "As do I." The connection between Harry and Voldemort is something I've pondered since that night in Godric's Hollow. The transfer of powers is unusual, but not unprecedented. But the Chamber of Secrets reopening now, just as we're hunting Horcruxes. You think it's connected? I think there are no coincidences where Tom Riddle is concerned. Dumbledore's voice was grave. Especially with the diary intended for Hogwarts this year. But we intercepted it, Minerva reminded him. It never reached the school. And yet the chamber has allegedly been opened. Dumbledore stopped walking, his expression troubled in the wand light. Which means either someone else has found a way to access it, or what? Minerva pressed when he didn't continue. Or there is another Horcrux at Hogwarts, Dumbledore said quietly. One we haven't accounted for. Minerva felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Ravenclaw's diadem? You mentioned it might have been hidden in the school. Perhaps. Dumbledore resumed walking. I've been researching the Room of Requirement, a hidden chamber that transforms itself according to the Seeker's needs. If Tom discovered it during his time at Hogwarts, it would have made an ideal hiding place. Then we searched the room immediately, Minerva said decisively. Not so simple, I'm afraid. The room contains centuries of hidden objects. Finding one specific item, even one as distinctive as the diadem, could take months. We don't have months, Albus. Minerva's voice was sharp with concern. Not if students are in danger. I know. Dumbledore sighed heavily. Which is why I've been considering a rather unorthodox approach. The house elves of Hogwarts know the castle better than anyone, including its hidden spaces. With their help, we might locate the diadem more quickly. House elves. Minerva considered this. It could work, especially if we involve the Hogwarts elves who have been there the longest. She paused, then added, and what of Harry? Should we tell him about the Horcruxes? About our suspicions regarding his connection to Voldemort? Not yet, Dumbledore said after a moment's consideration. He's still too young to bear that burden. For now, let us focus on protecting him and finding the remaining Horcruxes. When the time is right, he will need to know everything. As they reached the apparition point, Minerva couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. And if the chamber's monster strikes before we find the source? If a student is harmed? Then we face the consequences of our choices, Dumbledore replied soberly. As we always have. With twin cracks, they disappeared into the night, leaving the gaunt shack and its dark memories behind, but carrying away a piece of Voldemort's fractured soul, one step closer to ensuring he could never return to power. Colin Creevy's petrified body was discovered near the second-floor bathroom 3 days later, his camera still clutched in his rigid hands. The school was thrown into panic, with students moving in tight groups between classes, jumping at shadows. Aurors now patrolled the corridors openly, their crimson robes a stark contrast to the ancient stone walls. Rumors flew, that the chamber contained a basilisk, that Harry Potter was commanding it, that Muggle-born students would be sent home for their safety. Harry felt the weight of suspicious stares wherever he went. Only his closest friends stood by him, Ron and Hermione, of course, but also Neville Longbottom, who quietly mentioned that his grandmother spoke highly of Minister McGonagall and trusted her judgment about Harry. It was Hermione who first made the connection, after spending hours in the library researching Slytherin and the chamber. It has to be a basilisk, she exclaimed, bursting into the boys' dormitory one evening, causing Ron to yelp and pull his covers up to his chin. That's why you can hear it, Harry, because you speak Parseltongue. It's a giant serpent. Blimey, Hermione. Ron protested. You can't just barge in here. This is important, Ron, Hermione said impatiently, spreading out notes on Harry's bed. Look, the basilisk, known as the King of Serpents, can live for hundreds of years. Its methods of killing are most wondrous, for aside from its deadly venom, the basilisk has a murderous stare, and those who are fixed with the beam of its eye shall suffer instant death. That fits, Harry said slowly. The voice I heard in the walls saying it wanted to kill. But wait, if it kills by looking at you, why is Colin only petrified? That's the brilliant part, Hermione said, eyes shining with the thrill of solving a puzzle. Colin was found with his camera, remember? He must have seen the basilisk through the camera lens. He didn't look at it directly, so he was only petrified, not killed. Spiders, Ron muttered suddenly, looking pale. Remember how they were all fleeing that day? The book says spiders flee before the basilisk because it's their mortal enemy. Exactly. Hermione nodded vigorously. And the roosters that Hagrid found killed, basilisks can be killed by a rooster's crow. It all fits. But who's controlling it? Harry asked. If I'm not the heir of Slytherin, and I'm definitely not, then who is? That's what we need to figure out, Hermione said, gathering her notes. I think we should tell Professor Lupin about the basilisk theory. He'll know what to do. And what if whoever's controlling it comes after you next? Ron asked worriedly. You're Muggle-born, Hermione. You should be extra careful. I am being careful, she assured him. I've been carrying a mirror to check around corners. If the basilisk is using the plumbing to get around, like I think it is, we need to be prepared. They agreed to speak with Professor Lupin first thing in the morning. But as they were heading to his office after breakfast, an announcement echoed through the corridors in Headmaster Snape's distinctive voice: all students are to return to their dormitories immediately. All teachers report to the staff room. This is not a drill. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged alarmed glances. What do you think happened? Ron whispered. Nothing good, Harry replied grimly. Come on, let's go find out. Despite Hermione's protests about following rules, they made their way to the staff room and concealed themselves in a nearby broom closet, the door left slightly ajar so they could hear. Teachers filed in rapidly, their faces grim. Professor Lupin looked particularly pale, his eyes shadowed with concern. Headmaster Snape entered last, his black robes billowing. It has happened, he announced without preamble. A student has been taken into the chamber itself. Gasps and exclamations filled the room. Who? Professor Sprout asked, her hands pressed to her cheeks. Which student? Ginny Weasley, Snape replied, and Harry felt Ron stiffen beside him. Her brother Percy found a new message written on the wall: her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever. Ron made a strangled sound that Harry barely managed to muffle with his hand. The Aurors have been alerted, Snape continued. Minister McGonagall herself is on her way. In the meantime, all students will be confined to their dormitories. The school will likely be closed, pending location of the chamber and the culprit. But who could have taken her? Professor Flitwick asked, his voice squeaking more than usual. And how did they find the chamber when it's been lost for centuries? I believe I can answer that, a new voice said from the doorway. Harry craned his neck to see Minister McGonagall striding into the room, looking formidable in deep purple robes, followed by two Aurors and Albus Dumbledore. Minister, Snape acknowledged with a nod. You made good time. I came as soon as Amelia contacted me, McGonagall replied. Albus and I have been researching the chamber for months, ever since we intercepted a certain dark artifact intended for Hogwarts. What artifact? Lupin asked. A diary, Dumbledore answered. Tom Riddle's diary, to be precise, enchanted to possess whoever wrote in it, eventually allowing Tom to drain their life force and return to corporeal form. Shocked murmurs filled the staff room. We believed we had prevented the plan, McGonagall continued, but it seems Tom Riddle had a contingency. Our investigation of student belongings revealed that Miss Weasley possessed a small black book she claims to have found among her school supplies. According to her roommates, she wrote in it frequently, becoming more withdrawn as the year progressed. Are you suggesting Ginny Weasley is the one who opened the chamber? Professor Sprout looked horrified. But she's just a first year. And a Weasley. Not Ginny, Dumbledore clarified gently. But Tom Riddle, working through her. Possessing her during the time she couldn't remember, using her to open the chamber and release the basilisk. Basilisk? Snape's eyebrows rose. You're certain? The petrifications, the dead roosters, Harry Potter hearing voices in the walls that no one else could hear, it all points to a basilisk, McGonagall confirmed. And now, it seems, Tom has taken Ginny into the chamber itself, likely to complete the process of draining her life force. In the closet, Ron was trembling with fear and anger. Hermione clutched his arm in silent support. Then we must find the chamber immediately, Lupin said, standing. Where is it? That's the question we've been researching, Dumbledore replied. Based on historical accounts and the location of the attacks, we believe the entrance is somewhere near Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, where she died 50 years ago, during the last opening of the chamber. Harry couldn't contain himself any longer. He pushed the closet door open and stepped out, followed reluctantly by Ron and Hermione. I know how to get in, he announced, causing several teachers to draw their wands in surprise. Or at least, I think I do. The sink in Myrtle's bathroom has a snake scratched on the tap. If the entrance needs Parseltongue to open. Potter. Snape snapped. Why am I not surprised to find you eavesdropping on a private staff meeting? This isn't the time, Severus, McGonagall cut in. Mr. Potter, are you certain about this sink? Yes, Minister. Harry met her gaze steadily. I noticed it earlier this year. And I can open it, if it needs Parseltongue. Absolutely not, Snape said immediately. The boy is not going anywhere near the chamber. For once, I agree with Headmaster Snape, Lupin added, looking concerned. This is far too dangerous for a 12-year-old, Harry. But Ginny's down there. Ron protested, his face pale but determined. My sister. And Harry's the only one who can speak Parseltongue. Not the only one, Dumbledore said quietly. Though perhaps the only one present who would use it to help rather than harm. McGonagall straightened, decision made. Mr. Potter will show us the entrance and attempt to open it with Parseltongue. Then he, Mr. Weasley, and Miss Granger will remain with Professor Sprout while the rest of us enter the chamber. Her tone left no room for argument. Is that clear? Harry wanted to protest, but the stern look in McGonagall's eyes silenced him. Yes, Minister. Within minutes, they were assembled in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. The ghost herself was surprisingly helpful, pointing out exactly where she'd seen the great yellow eyes before her death. Harry examined the sink carefully, finding the tiny snake scratched on one of the copper taps. That's it, he said, pointing it out. Now I just need to speak Parseltongue to it. How do you do that if you're not looking at a real snake? Ron asked. Harry frowned in concentration. I have to imagine it's real. He stared at the tiny snake engraving, willing himself to see it as alive. Open, he said, but it came out as normal English. He tried again, focusing harder, imagining the metal snake slithering across the tap. Open, he hissed, and this time he knew it had worked. The sibilant sounds of Parseltongue emanated from his throat. At once, the sink began to move. It sank right out of sight, revealing a large pipe wide enough for a man to slide into, or a basilisk to emerge from. Well done, Mr. Potter, McGonagall said briskly. Now, as agreed, you three will remain here with Professor Sprout. But Minister, Harry began. No arguments, McGonagall cut him off. This is ministry business now. One by one, the adults lowered themselves into the pipe, Dumbledore first, followed by the Aurors, then Lupin, then Snape. McGonagall went last, pausing at the entrance to give them a stern look. Stay here, she ordered. Professor Sprout, if they attempt to follow, you have my permission to use a full body bind curse. Then she was gone, sliding down into the darkness below. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged glances. Professor Sprout conjured chairs for them all and settled in to wait, her wand ready. They'll find her, she said, trying to sound reassuring. The minister doesn't fail. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Moaning Myrtle drifted in and out, alternately curious and bored. Ron paced the bathroom, unable to sit still. Hermione chewed her lower lip anxiously. Harry stared at the open pipe, straining to hear any sounds from below. "What's taking so long?" Ron burst out finally. "Ginny could be, she might be, now, Mr. Weasley," Professor Sprout said soothingly. "The Minister and Professor Dumbledore are extremely capable. If anyone can save your sister, they can." Suddenly, a distant rumbling echoed up from the pipe, followed by what sounded like a massive collapse. "What was that?" Hermione gasped, jumping to her feet. Before anyone could answer, flames erupted from the pipe entrance, brilliant red and gold flames that coalesced into the shape of a phoenix. Fawkes soared into the bathroom, trilling urgently. "Something's wrong," Harry said, moving toward the pipe. "They need help." "Mr. Potter, you will stay right where you are," Professor Sprout said firmly, raising her wand. But Fawkes swooped down, dropping something at Harry's feet, the sorting hat. As Harry bent to pick it up, confused, the phoenix grabbed the back of his robes in its talons and, with strength that belied its size, pulled him toward the pipe entrance. "Harry!" Hermione cried, lunging for him. "Petrificus totalis." Professor Sprout cast, but Fawkes yanked Harry downward just in time, and the spell hit the wall instead. Harry felt himself falling, sliding down the slimy pipe with the sorting hat clutched in his hand and Fawkes flying just ahead of him, illuminating the way with its fiery plumage. Behind him, he could hear Hermione and Ron arguing with Professor Sprout, and then more bodies entering the pipe. They were all heading into the Chamber of Secrets, whether Minister McGonagall approved or not. The cavern beneath Hogwarts stretched vast and dimly lit, its ceiling lost in shadows. Water dripped steadily from stalactites, forming puddles on the stone floor. The air was thick with the smell of damp and something else, something ancient and reptilian. Minerva McGonagall stood with her back to Albus Dumbledore, both of them facing outward, wands raised as they circled slowly. Around them lay the unconscious forms of the two Aurors who had accompanied them. Nearby, Severus Snape worked frantically over Remus Lupin, who had been wounded by falling debris when part of the tunnel had collapsed. And before them, emerging from the mouth of a massive stone statue of Salazar Slytherin, came the basilisk, 60 feet of gleaming, poisonous green scales, its massive body thick as an oak tree. "Don't look at its eyes," Minerva reminded everyone, though they had already conjured reflective shields to view the creature indirectly. "Albus, the roosters." "Dead, I'm afraid," Dumbledore replied calmly. "Our young Mr. Riddle was thorough." Near the statue's feet lay Ginny Weasley, pale as death but still breathing faintly. Standing over her was a tall, handsome youth of about 16, growing more solid by the minute as Ginny grew paler. Tom Riddle, or rather, the memory of him preserved in the diary that lay open beside Ginny's limp hand. "Minister McGonagall," Riddle said, his voice high and cold. "How disappointing. I had hoped Harry Potter would come to the girl's rescue. It would have been so poetic, the boy who lived dying alongside the blood traitor." "Tom," Minerva acknowledged, keeping her wand trained on the basilisk, which was now fully emerged and awaiting Riddle's command. "Still using others to do your dirty work, I see." Riddle's handsome face twisted with anger. "You dare speak to me with such familiarity? You, who were nothing but an unremarkable student when I walked these halls." "Unremarkable?" Minerva allowed herself a thin smile. "I seem to recall outperforming you in transfiguration, Tom. You never did master the finer points of animate-to-animate transformations." This was a calculated jab, designed to throw him off balance. It worked. Riddle's eyes flashed with rage. "Kill her," he commanded the basilisk in Parseltongue. "Kill them all." The massive serpent lunged forward, jaws wide. Minerva and Dumbledore moved in perfect synchronization, decades of working together evident in their fluid coordination. As Dumbledore conjured a wall of flame to momentarily blind the basilisk, Minerva transfigured the stone floor beneath it into quicksand, causing the great serpent to sink several feet, slowing its advance. "The diary, Severus," Dumbledore called, maintaining the fire barrier. "We must destroy the diary to stop Tom." Snape looked up from tending to Lupin, his face grim. "I need more time. Lupin's injuries are severe." "You don't have time," Riddle mocked, growing more substantial by the second. Ginny's breathing had become shallow and irregular. "Soon I will be fully restored, and Lord Voldemort will return to finish what he started." The basilisk had freed itself from the quicksand and was circling more cautiously now, seeking an opening. Minerva and Dumbledore maintained their defensive position, but they were effectively trapped between the serpent and the collapsed tunnel behind them. "Confringo!" Minerva cast at the ceiling above the basilisk, bringing down tons of rock and debris. But the serpent was too fast, slithering aside as the cavern shook with the impact. "Your petty spells cannot harm Slytherin's beast," Riddle laughed. "The basilisk obeys only me, the true heir of Slytherin." A flash of flame announced Fawkes's arrival, the phoenix soaring into the chamber with a trilling cry that somehow bolstered Minerva's strength. And with the phoenix came, to her horror, Harry Potter, sliding down a pile of rubble with the sorting hat in his hand, followed closely by Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger. "Potter!" Snape shouted. "Get back!" But it was too late. Riddle had seen them, his face lighting with malicious delight. "Harry Potter," he said softly. "How kind of you to join us after all. Now I can kill you myself." "Harry, don't look at the basilisk's eyes," Hermione cried, pulling Ron toward his sister's prone form. Fawkes swooped toward the basilisk, talons extended. With shocking speed, the phoenix clawed at the serpent's eyes, gouging them out in a spray of blood before the creature could react. "No!" Riddle screamed in fury. "It doesn't matter. It can still hear you. Kill the boy. Kill him now." The blinded basilisk thrashed in pain, then oriented itself toward Harry, tongue flicking to taste the air. It lunged, but Harry dodged aside, showing the quick reflexes that made him a talented seeker. "Harry!" Dumbledore called. "The hat. Look in the sorting hat." Without questioning, Harry thrust his hand into the ancient hat. His fingers closed around something solid, a hilt. He pulled, and out came a gleaming silver sword, its blade etched with the name Godric Gryffindor. "The diary!" Minerva shouted, deflecting a curse Riddle had sent her way. "Destroy the diary, Harry." But the basilisk was between Harry and Ginny, its massive body coiling as it prepared to strike again. Harry held the sword uncertainly, clearly having no idea how to use such a weapon. "Get to Ginny!" Ron yelled to him, attempting to circle around the basilisk from the other side. "We'll distract it." "No, Ron!" Hermione cried, but the redhead had already picked up a rock and hurled it at the basilisk, striking its scales with a loud clang. The serpent whipped toward the sound, allowing Harry to dart forward. But Riddle was ready. He aimed Ginny's wand at Harry and shouted, "Crucio!" Harry dropped to the ground, screaming in agony. The sword clattered beside him. "Enough!" Minerva's voice cut through the chamber like a whip. With a complex motion of her wand, she transformed the fallen rocks around Riddle into a flock of razor-beaked ravens that swarmed him, forcing him to defend himself and breaking his concentration on the Cruciatus curse. Harry gasped for breath as the pain ended. He scrambled for the sword, pushing himself to his feet just as the basilisk struck again. This time, Harry wasn't quick enough. The serpent's fangs grazed his arm, tearing his robes and leaving a bloody gash. "Harry!" Hermione screamed. But Harry didn't falter. With a surge of desperate strength, he thrust the sword upward as the basilisk reared back for another strike. The blade pierced the roof of the serpent's mouth, driving deep into its brain. A terrible screech echoed through the chamber. The basilisk thrashed once, twice, then crashed to the ground, dead, but not before one of its fangs had sunk deep into Harry's arm. "You're dead, Potter," Riddle gloated as Harry staggered toward Ginny, the sword dragging behind him, basilisk venom spreading through his veins. "Dead like the mudblood mother who tried to save you." Fawkes landed beside Harry, crooning softly. Pearly tears dripped from its eyes onto Harry's wound. The wound began to heal, the venom neutralized by the Phoenix's magical tears. "Phoenix tears," Riddle hissed, realizing what was happening. "I forgot." But Harry had reached Ginny and the diary. With the last of his strength, he raised the sword of Gryffindor and plunged it through the diary's cover. Ink spurted from the pages like blood. Riddle screamed, a long, terrible shriek of pain and rage. His form began to splinter, light bursting from every part of him until, with a final wail, he exploded into nothingness. Ginny gasped, color flooding back into her cheeks as she regained consciousness. "Harry," she whispered weakly. Where am I? What's happened?" "It's all right," Harry assured her, dropping the sword and gathering her into his arms. "It's over. The basilisk is dead, and Riddle is gone." Minerva exchanged a glance with Dumbledore, who nodded with quiet pride. Then she strode over to the children, her expression stern but her eyes suspiciously bright. "Mr. Potter," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I believe I gave explicit instructions for you to remain above with Professor Sprout." "Fawkes brought me the hat," Harry explained, looking up at her. I think he knew I needed to be here." Minerva surveyed the scene, the dead basilisk, the destroyed diary, the children huddled together in exhausted triumph. "Well, it seems Fawkes was correct. Though we will discuss the matter of disobeying direct orders from the Minister for Magic at a later time." She helped Ginny to her feet, supporting the girl's weight. "Now, let's get out of this dreadful place. I believe we have a school to keep open, and Mr. and Mrs. Weasley will be anxious to see their daughter." As they made their way back toward the entrance, aided by Fawkes's ability to carry them up the pipe, Minerva reflected on how differently this might have ended without her early intervention at the Ministry. If the diary had reached Ginny earlier in the year, if they hadn't been investigating the chamber already, if Aurors hadn't been stationed at Hogwarts. The Chamber of Secrets was closed once more, and this time, she intended to ensure it remained that way permanently. The Great Hall buzzed with excitement as students gathered for the end-of-year feast. Gryffindor banners hung from the ceiling. They had won the House Cup for the second year running, thanks in no small part to the points awarded to Harry, Ron, and Hermione for their role in solving the mystery of the Chamber of Secrets. At the high table, Headmaster Snape looked sourly at the decorations, though even he had grudgingly acknowledged the trio's bravery. Beside him sat Professor Lupin, fully recovered from his injuries and deep in conversation with Professor Flitwick. The Aurors who had been stationed at Hogwarts all year were absent, having returned to their regular duties now that the threat was past. Harry glanced up as the doors to the Great Hall opened, admitting a latecomer to the feast. Minister McGonagall strode in, looking formal yet approachable in robes of deep green, her hair in its usual tight bun. Snape rose to greet her, and a hush fell over the hall as students realized who had arrived. "Students of Hogwarts," Snape announced, his voice carrying effortlessly. "We are honored by the presence of the Minister for Magic, who has requested a few minutes to address you before the feast begins." McGonagall took her place at the lectern, surveying the sea of young faces before her. Harry thought he saw her eyes linger briefly on him, Ron, and Hermione. "Thank you, Headmaster Snape," she began. "As most of you know, this has been a challenging year for Hogwarts. The opening of the Chamber of Secrets, the attacks on students, and the disturbing revelation that Lord Voldemort, many students gasped or flinched at the name, continues to seek ways to return to power." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I will not lie to you or offer false comfort," she continued. "The wizarding world faces difficult times ahead. But what I witnessed in this school over the past year gives me hope. I saw students from different houses looking out for one another. I saw courage in the face of fear. I saw wisdom applied to solving ancient mysteries. And I saw loyalty that transcended house rivalries. Her gaze swept the hall again. These are the qualities that will ultimately defeat the darkness. Not just powerful spells or clever strategies, but the strength of character demonstrated by so many of you. She straightened, her voice growing firmer. To that end, I am pleased to announce several initiatives that will take effect next year. First, an expanded defense against the dark arts curriculum, emphasizing practical skills and teamwork. Second, a new inter-house council that will give students a greater voice in school governance. And third, a special dispensation allowing interested 5th years and above to join junior branches of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement for summer internships. Excited whispers broke out across the hall. These changes reflect my belief that the next generation must be prepared, not just academically, but in all ways, for the challenges that lie ahead. McGonagall's expression softened slightly. I stand before you not just as minister, but as someone who taught many of your parents, and in some cases, your grandparents. I have seen what this school and its students can accomplish when united in purpose. She raised her goblet. And so I ask you to join me in a toast, to Hogwarts, to cooperation between the ministry and this great institution, and to a future built on the best qualities of all 4 houses. The students and staff raised their goblets in response, the great hall ringing with the sound of hundreds of voices saying, "Here, here." As McGonagall took a seat next to Snape for the feast, Harry turned to his friends. "Do you think she knows?" he asked quietly. "About the diary being a Horcrux?" Hermione nodded. "She and Dumbledore were already hunting them, remember? That's why they got to the chamber so quickly. But there are more, aren't there?" Ron said, lowering his voice further. "You heard what Riddle said, that was just a memory of him at 16. The real you-know-who is still out there somewhere. And we'll be ready," Harry said with determination. "Like the minister said, we need to be prepared." As the feast appeared on their plates, Harry caught McGonagall watching him from the high table. She gave him a small nod, as if confirming his words. Whatever came next, they wouldn't face it unprepared or alone. The chamber had been sealed, one Horcrux destroyed, and the ministry was finally taking the threat of Voldemort's return seriously. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was hope. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 3, The Turning Tide. The office of the Minister for Magic was silent save for the rhythmic ticking of the ornate grandfather clock in the corner. Minerva McGonagall stood at the enchanted window, watching Magical Maintenance's version of a gentle summer rainfall. 3 years had passed since she'd reluctantly accepted this office, 3 years of rebuilding, reforming, and preparing for a storm she knew was coming. And now, it seemed, the storm had arrived. Behind her, the pensieve on her desk swirled with recently extracted memories, silvery wisps of horror she had just witnessed. The attack on Azkaban prison had been swift and devastating. Dementors, once guardians of the wizarding prison, had abandoned their posts and joined Voldemort's growing forces. Death Eaters who had been imprisoned for over a decade were now free, including Bellatrix Lestrange, whose maniacal laughter still echoed in the memories Kingsley Shacklebolt had provided. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called, not turning from the window. Amelia Bones stepped into the office, her normally immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually pristine robes were wrinkled from what had likely been a sleepless night. "The official count is in," Amelia said without preamble. 15 Aurors dead, 23 wounded. 12 prisoners remain unaccounted for, including the entire inner circle of you-know-who's followers. Voldemort, Minerva corrected automatically, finally turning to face her head of magical law enforcement. "Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself, Amelia. We've discussed this." A ghost of a smile touched Amelia's lips. "Old habits, Minister." "Indeed." Minerva moved to her desk, vanishing the memories from the pensieve with a flick of her wand. "And the Muggle witnesses?" "Obliviated, though it stretched our resources thin." The Muggle newspapers are reporting a gas explosion at an abandoned oil platform in the North Sea. Minerva nodded, having expected as much. And our response? Amelia straightened, her monocle glinting in the lamplight. The Auror office is on full alert. I've recalled all personnel from foreign assignments and suspended leave. The Order members embedded in other departments are coordinating security enhancements for key locations. Not enough, Minerva said, her Scottish accent more pronounced with fatigue. Voldemort has been preparing for this moment for 2 years. The loss of 4 Horcruxes has forced his hand, but make no mistake, he is ready. The diary, the ring, the locket, and most recently Hufflepuff's cup, recovered from the Lestrange vault just 3 weeks prior. 4 down, but at least 2 remained unidentified or undestroyed. What would you have me do, Minister? Amelia asked. Minerva sat down, gesturing for Amelia to do the same. I'm invoking Emergency Magical Executive Order 7. Amelia's eyebrows shot up. That hasn't been used since Grindelwald's war. Desperate times, Amelia. Minerva's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. The Order authorizes immediate expansion of Auror forces, emergency recruitment protocols, and the formation of a civilian defense corps under Ministry authority. The Wisengamot will object, let them, Minerva interrupted. I've spent 3 years building enough political capital for this moment. Dumbledore is gathering the full Order of the Phoenix as we speak. Hogwarts will serve as our secondary headquarters if the Ministry falls. When the Ministry falls, you mean, Amelia said quietly. Minerva's gaze sharpened. You believe that's inevitable? I think we need to be realistic. The Ministry has always been vulnerable to infiltration. We've identified and removed most of Voldemort's sympathizers, but there will be others, hidden deeper. Amelia leaned forward. And then there's Dolores Umbridge. Ah, yes. Minerva's lips thinned at the mention of her former undersecretary. I assume she's wasted no time in calling for a vote of no confidence. Scheduled for tomorrow morning. She's rallied the old pureblood faction, claiming your alarmist policies regarding regarding Voldemort have destabilized the wizarding world and directly led to the Azkaban breakout. Convenient timing, Minerva noted dryly. Almost as if she knew the attack was coming. You suspect her of being a Death Eater? Not exactly. Dolores isn't ideological enough for that. She simply aligns herself with whoever she believes will grant her the most power. Minerva sighed. Which makes her perhaps more dangerous than a true believer. She stood and moved to a large map of Britain mounted on the wall, marked with glowing dots of various colors. Several red dots pulsed ominously in the north. These are the magical signatures we've been tracking, she explained, pointing to a cluster near Yorkshire. Notice the concentration near Little Hangleton, exactly where we destroyed the Gaunt family ring 2 years ago. He's returned to his roots, Amelia observed. People like Tom Riddle are creatures of habit and symbolism. He believes returning to the place of his ancestors gives him power. Minerva tapped the map with her wand, and it zoomed in on the area. I've dispatched Order members to monitor the region more closely. Remus Lupin and Sirius Black are leading that operation. Black? Amelia looked surprised. Is he stable enough for field work? 2 years of healing and rehabilitation have done wonders, Minerva replied. And his personal stake in this fight gives him motivation few others can match. A silver lynx Patronus suddenly materialized in the center of the office. Kingsley Shacklebolt's deep voice emerged from it, emergency at Hogwarts. Harry Potter has collapsed during a clemency training. Claims to have seen inside Voldemort's mind. Requesting your immediate presence. The Patronus dissolved, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Go, Amelia said immediately. I'll prepare the Aurors and begin implementing the emergency protocols. Minerva nodded, her face grave as she reached for her traveling cloak. Have Alastair double the security at the Department of Mysteries. If Harry has indeed seen into Voldemort's mind. You think the prophecy is his target? I think, Minerva said carefully, that we are running out of time. With that, she strode to the fireplace, threw in a handful of flow powder, and vanished in a whirl of green flames, leaving Amelia Bones to organize the wizarding world's first true war footing in over a decade. The hospital wing at Hogwarts was unnervingly quiet when Minerva emerged from the fireplace in Madame Pomfrey's office. Severus Snape stood at a window, his back rigid, while Albus Dumbledore sat beside a bed containing a pale-faced Harry Potter. Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger hovered nearby, their faces etched with concern. "Minister," Dumbledore acknowledged, rising to meet her. "Thank you for coming so quickly. What happened?" Minerva asked without preamble, her eyes fixed on Harry, who was conscious but clearly shaken. "Potter experienced a vision during a clemency training," Snape reported, turning from the window. "Despite my explicit instructions to empty his mind, he appears to have inadvertently strengthened the connection between himself and the Dark Lord." "It wasn't intentional," Harry protested weakly, attempting to sit up. "It just happened. One moment Professor Snape was trying to break into my mind, and the next I was seeing through Voldemort's eyes." "And what did you see, Mr. Potter?" Minerva asked, her voice gentler as she approached his bedside. Harry swallowed hard. He was in some kind of grand manor house, talking to Bellatrix Lestrange and Dolores Umbridge. Minerva's eyebrows rose sharply. "You're certain it was Umbridge?" "Absolutely," Harry nodded. "Pink cardigan, black bow, and that sickly sweet voice. Unmistakable." "What were they discussing?" "A prophecy." Harry's green eyes met hers. "Voldemort wants something from the Department of Mysteries, a prophecy about him and me. Umbridge said she could get him access through her supporters in the Wizengamot, especially after the vote tomorrow." Minerva exchanged a significant look with Dumbledore. "It seems our suspicions about Madame Umbridge were correct, if not entirely accurate. Not a Death Eater, but certainly a collaborator." "There's more," Harry continued urgently. "Voldemort said something about the other Horcruxes being secure. He specifically mentioned something at Hogwarts, hidden where no one would think to look." "The diadem," Dumbledore murmured. "We suspected it might be here, but the Room of Requirement contains centuries of hidden objects." "That's it!" Hermione suddenly exclaimed, stepping forward. "Harry, remember that room we found last year? Where the DA has been practicing?" "The Room of Requirement, yes," Harry nodded. "It transforms based on what the Seeker needs," Hermione continued excitedly. "What if we specifically asked it to show us where the diadem is hidden?" "That might actually work, Miss Granger," Snape admitted reluctantly. "The room's magic is responsive to precise requests." Minerva made a swift decision. "Mr. Potter, if you're feeling able, perhaps you and your friends could investigate this possibility immediately. Severus, please go with them." "And the prophecy?" Dumbledore asked quietly as the others prepared to leave. "I'll handle that personally," Minerva replied, her voice equally low. "It's time we removed it from the Department of Mysteries entirely. With Umbridge plotting access for Voldemort. A trap, perhaps?" Dumbledore suggested. "Allow Tom to believe the prophecy remains there, while setting an ambush?" Minerva considered this. "Risky, but potentially effective. I'll discuss it with Amelia and Alastair." She turned to Harry, who was now standing shakily beside his friends. "Mr. Potter, before you go, did you see anything else in this vision? Any hint of Voldemort's immediate plans?" Harry frowned in concentration. "He mentioned something about moving forward the timetable. That they couldn't wait any longer because..." He paused, his face paling further. "Because you were getting too close to finding all of them. The Horcruxes." Minerva's expression hardened. "Then we have less time than I thought. Find the diadem, destroy it if you can. I'm returning to the Ministry to secure the prophecy and deal with Madame Umbridge." "Minister," Hermione said hesitantly, "if Umbridge has supporters throughout the Ministry." "I am well aware of the risks, Miss Granger," Minerva replied with a tight smile. "But I didn't survive 2 wars against Voldemort by being easily outmaneuvered." As she turned to leave, Dumbledore caught her arm gently. "Minerva, perhaps I should accompany you. If Tom himself attempts to retrieve the prophecy." "Your place is here, Albus," she said firmly. "Hogwarts must be secured, especially if we're correct about the diadem. Besides," her smile turned grim, "I believe it's time Madame Umbridge learned exactly why attempting to outmaneuver a former Transfiguration professor is extremely unwise." With that, she strode from the hospital wing, her mind already formulating plans for what would likely be the most crucial 24 hours of her tenure as Minister for Magic. The room of requirement materialized before them as an impossibly vast cathedral of hidden things, towering piles of broken and banned items, forgotten treasures, and concealed contraband from centuries of Hogwarts students. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood at the entrance, momentarily overwhelmed by the task before them. "Bloody hell," Ron whispered, craning his neck to see the distant ceiling. "How are we supposed to find anything in this?" "By being methodical," Snape replied coolly, stepping past them. "The diadem of Ravenclaw is one of the most powerful magical artifacts ever created. Even corrupted by the Dark Lord's soul, it should emit a distinctive magical signature." Hermione nodded. "Like the locket did, that cold, creeping feeling." "Precisely, Miss Granger." Snape drew his wand. "I will take the left quadrant. Potter, the right. Weasley and Granger, the center. Cast detection charms for dark magic at regular intervals, and do not, under any circumstances, touch anything that responds to those charms without alerting me first." "Yes, sir," they responded in unison, somewhat surprised by Snape's businesslike approach. The search began in earnest. Harry picked his way through dusty corridors of stacked furniture, discarded books, and mysterious objects draped in ancient sheets. The events of the past 3 years had changed him. At 15, he was no longer the bewildered boy who had arrived at Hogwarts knowing nothing of the wizarding world. Training with the Reformed Order of the Phoenix, occlumency lessons, however painful, with Snape, and the knowledge that Voldemort's return was not just possible but inevitable had forged him into someone sharper, more focused. "Revelio Tenebris," he muttered every few meters, watching for the telltale purple glow that would indicate dark magic. Most objects remained inert, though occasionally something would emit a faint shimmer, usually simple jinxed items or mildly cursed objects left by students decades ago. An hour into their search, Ron's voice rang out from several aisles away. "I think I've found something." Harry hurried toward the sound, meeting Hermione at a junction between 2 towering piles of broken furniture. They found Ron standing before a tarnished tiara resting atop a chipped bust, a look of mingled triumph and disgust on his face. "Don't touch it," Hermione warned as Harry reached toward it. "Wait for Professor Snape." "No need to wait, Miss Granger." Snape's voice came from behind them, causing them all to jump. He moved forward, his wand extended cautiously. "Specialis Revelio." The diadem glowed an ugly, pulsating red. "Is that it?" Harry asked, feeling a familiar cold sensation emanating from the object, the same he'd felt from the diary 3 years ago. "Ravenclaw's lost diadem," Snape confirmed grimly. "Corrupted into a vessel for the Dark Lord's soul fragment." "How do we destroy it?" Ron asked. "With great care, Mr. Weasley." Snape conjured a dragonhide bag. "The headmaster and minister have been researching methods since discovering the diary was a Horcrux. Basilisk venom is among the few substances powerful enough." The chamber, Harry realized. "There's still a dead basilisk down there." Snape nodded. "Indeed. The headmaster has been harvesting its parts, for this exact purpose." Using his wand, Snape carefully levitated the diadem into the bag without touching it. "We must take this to Dumbledore immediately. He has the means to destroy it safely." As they made their way out of the room of requirement, Harry felt a strange mixture of triumph and foreboding. Another Horcrux found, bringing them one step closer to making Voldemort mortal again. But if Voldemort was accelerating his plans, as the vision had suggested. "Professor," he said as they hurried through the corridors, "in my vision, Voldemort seemed angry, desperate, even. Like he knew he was running out of time." "The Dark Lord has always feared death above all else, Potter," Snape replied. "Each Horcrux destroyed brings him closer to the mortality he so despises." "But that's just it," Harry persisted. "He said something about a contingency, something about the boy himself." "What did he mean?" Snape's pace faltered almost imperceptibly. "That is a question best addressed to the headmaster, Potter." They reached the stone gargoyle guarding Dumbledore's office, which leapt aside without a password as Snape approached. The headmaster was waiting for them, as though he'd known they would succeed. Fawkes trilled softly from his perch as they entered. "You found it," Dumbledore stated rather than asked, his eyes fixed on the dragonhide bag. Snape placed the bag carefully on the desk. "The diadem of Ravenclaw, as we suspected. The magical signature is unmistakable." Dumbledore nodded gravely. "Well done, all of you. This discovery may have shifted the balance significantly in our favor." "Sir," Harry said, stepping forward, "what did Voldemort mean about a contingency involving me?" A heavy silence fell over the office. Dumbledore and Snape exchanged a look that made Harry's stomach clench with apprehension. "Perhaps now is the time, Albus," Snape said quietly. "If the Dark Lord is accelerating his plans." Dumbledore sighed deeply, suddenly looking every one of his many years. "Yes, I suppose it is." He gestured for them all to sit. "What I am about to share with you is something Minister McGonagall and I have suspected for some time, but confirmed only recently, through careful study of the Horcruxes we've already destroyed." "Sir?" Harry prompted when Dumbledore paused. "Harry, the night Voldemort tried to kill you as a baby, the night the killing curse rebounded, something unprecedented occurred." Dumbledore's blue eyes held no twinkle now, only sorrow. "When the curse rebounded, it didn't merely deflect back at Voldemort. The violent magical backlash caused a fragment of his already unstable soul to break free." Harry felt a chill of horror beginning to spread through him. "And that fragment attached itself to the only living thing remaining in the room," Dumbledore confirmed gently. "You, Harry." The silence that followed was deafening. Harry felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath him. Ron looked stunned, while Hermione had her hands pressed to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm a Horcrux." Harry finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not exactly," Dumbledore clarified. "A Horcrux is created intentionally, through a specific ritual. What happened to you was accidental, unprecedented. But the effect is similar. You carry a fragment of Voldemort's soul, which is why you can speak Parseltongue, why you sometimes see through his eyes. And why he can't be truly defeated while I'm alive," Harry finished, the horrifying logic becoming clear. "That's the contingency, isn't it? Even if you destroy all the other Horcruxes, he can't die while I'm alive." "Harry, no," Hermione began, but Harry cut her off. "It makes sense now. Everything, the connection, the visions, the scar pain." His hand rose unconsciously to the lightning bolt on his forehead. "So I have to die, then? For Voldemort to be defeated?" "That is what Tom believes," Dumbledore said carefully. "But he doesn't understand something crucial about what happened that night in Godric's Hollow." "What's that, sir?" Harry asked, desperately clinging to any hope. "Your mother's sacrifice created a protection that lives in your blood, a protection Voldemort took into himself when he used your blood for his resurrection ritual last year." Dumbledore leaned forward. "This creates a paradox. He cannot die while your blood flows in his veins, maintaining your mother's protection. You cannot die by his hand while that same protection exists. So what happens?" Ron asked, finding his voice at last. "They're both just, immortal." "No, Mr. Weasley," Snape interjected. It means that if the Dark Lord himself attempts to kill Potter, he may destroy only the soul fragment within him, not Potter himself. May. Hermione seized on the word. You're not certain. Magic this complex, this unprecedented, can never be entirely predictable, Dumbledore admitted. But Minister McGonagall and I have been researching this possibility since we confirmed our suspicions about Harry's scar 2 years ago. We believe there is a significant chance that Harry could survive, while the Horcrux within him is destroyed. Harry sat back, his mind reeling. So either way, I have to face him. I have to let him try to kill me. Only as a last resort, Dumbledore said firmly. We are still exploring other options. Ancient magics that might extract the soul fragment without harming you. But we don't have time for that now, do we? Harry's voice had grown steadier. Not if Voldemort is accelerating his plans. Before Dumbledore could answer, a silver cat Patronus leapt through the office wall. Minister McGonagall's voice emerged from it, terse and urgent, ambush at the Ministry. Umbridge revealed as collaborator. Department of Mysteries under attack. Prophecy secure but heavily outnumbered. Send reinforcements immediately. The Patronus dissolved, leaving a moment of stunned silence before Dumbledore rose to his feet with surprising agility for a man of his age. Severus, alert the Order members stationed in Hogsmeade. Harry, Ron, Hermione, return to your dormitory immediately. But sir, Harry began. This is not open for discussion, Potter, Snape snapped. The Minister and the Order can handle this situation. With respect, Professor, Harry said, standing his ground, Voldemort is after me. The prophecy is about me. I should be there. Absolutely not, Snape's voice was like ice. The Dark Lord would like nothing better than to lure you to the Ministry. It's precisely what he wants. Harry, Dumbledore said more gently, I understand your desire to help, but the best thing you can do now is remain safe. We need to destroy this Horcrux immediately. He gestured to the bag containing the diadem. And then I must join the Minister at the Ministry. Severus will remain here to protect the school. Harry wanted to argue further, but Dumbledore's expression was unyielding. Reluctantly, he nodded. Come on, Hermione said, tugging his arm. Let's go back to the common room. As they left the office, Harry's mind was racing. He couldn't just sit in Gryffindor Tower while others fought a battle that was ultimately about him. The prophecy, his connection to Voldemort, it all centered on him, and he needed to be part of the solution. An idea began to form in his mind. If Dumbledore and McGonagall were right about the Horcrux within him, then perhaps there was a way he could help that no one else could. A way that might end this once and for all. Hermione, Ron, he said as they reached the fat lady's portrait. I need your help with something. The Department of Mysteries was in chaos. Spells ricocheted off walls and displays, shattering glass and sending dangerous magical artifacts spinning through the air. Minerva ducked behind an overturned desk as a killing curse blasted past her, exploding against the wall in a shower of green sparks. Across the room, Kingsley Shacklebolt was engaged in a furious duel with 2 Death Eaters simultaneously, his wand a blur as he alternated between shields and offensive spells. Nearby, Nymphadora Tonks was helping a wounded Unspeakable toward the exit, her normally vibrant hair a dull brown with concentration. Stupefy. Minerva cast, dropping a masked Death Eater who had been creeping toward Tonks' blind side. The skirmish had been raging for nearly 20 minutes, and while the Order and Aurors had managed to keep the Death Eaters contained to the lower levels of the department, they were outnumbered and fighting defensively. A high, cold laugh echoed through the chamber, raising gooseflesh on Minerva's arms. Voldemort himself had arrived. Minister McGonagall, his sibilant voice carried easily over the sounds of battle. How disappointed I was to discover the prophecy missing from its shelf. Your work, I presume. Minerva straightened, casting a shield charm before stepping into view. Voldemort stood in the center of the room, his snake-like face even more terrifying than the reports had described. Behind him, Bellatrix Lestrange grinned manically, while Dolores Umbridge, looking distinctly out of place among the Death Eaters in her pink cardigan, stood with a simpering smile. Tom, Minerva acknowledged, using his birth name deliberately. You're looking unwell. Voldemort's lipless mouth twisted in anger. You dare use that name? You always were presumptuous, Professor. Minister, actually, Minerva corrected, subtly motioning for Kingsley to hold position. She needed to keep Voldemort talking while reinforcements arrived. And yes, I removed the prophecy. Did you really think I'd leave it for you to find after young Mr. Potter warned us of your plans? The Potter boy, Voldemort hissed. Always interfering. No matter. I'll deal with him soon enough. You've been trying to deal with him for 15 years, Tom, Minerva replied coolly. Your record thus far isn't particularly impressive. Bellatrix shrieked with rage at the insult, but Voldemort held up a pale hand to silence her. Brave words from a woman about to lose everything she's built, he said softly. Your ministry has already fallen, Minister. My people control the upper levels. The Auror office is in flames. And your precious reforms? He gestured to Umbridge. About to be dismantled by my new appointee. Hem, Umbridge gave her signature throat-clearing cough. I'm afraid he's quite right, Minerva. The Wisingamot emergency session I called has already passed a vote of no confidence in your leadership. As senior undersecretary and next in the line of succession, I will be assuming control immediately, with certain policy adjustments, of course. Such as? Minerva asked, playing for time as she noticed movement in the shadows behind Voldemort's group. A more realistic approach to blood status, Umbridge replied with false sweetness. Recognition of the natural hierarchy within magical society. And of course, a re-evaluation of relations with inferior magical creatures and half-breeds. I see. Minerva's voice was ice. And your first act as minister will be to hand control of Wizarding Britain to a half-blood megalomaniac whose father was a muggle. How very consistent of you, Dolores. Umbridge's smile faltered slightly. Beside her, Bellatrix looked at Voldemort with a flicker of confusion. Lies, Voldemort snarled. The heir of Slytherin is a half-blood named Tom Marvolo Riddle, Minerva finished for him. Son of Mary P. Gaunt, a near squib from a decaying pure-blood line, and Tom Riddle Sr., a muggle she enchanted with a love potion. I have the records, Tom. I've seen your orphanage file. Voldemort's rage was palpable, the air around him seeming to darken. You will regret those words, McGonagall. Avada Kedavra. Minerva transfigured a piece of debris into a silver shield that intercepted the killing curse, exploding into fragments that she immediately transformed into a flock of razor-beaked ravens, which swarmed toward Voldemort and his followers. The battle resumed with renewed intensity. Minerva had always been a formidable duelist, but facing Voldemort directly taxed even her considerable skills. She wove transfiguration into her combat style, constantly changing the battlefield to her advantage, turning floors to quicksand beneath Death Eaters' feet, animating statues to intercept curses, conjuring walls of flame to separate enemies. You cannot win, McGonagall, Voldemort taunted as he blasted through her defenses, forcing her back. Even now, my forces are taking control of Hogwarts. The diadem is secure. The snake is protected. Your hunt for my Horcruxes has failed. A triumphant smile crossed Minerva's face. Is it? At this very moment, Albus Dumbledore is destroying Ravenclaw's diadem with basilisk venom. The locket and cup are already gone. As is the ring. And the diary. For the first time, genuine alarm flickered across Voldemort's inhuman features. You lie. I've never been much for lying, Tom, Minerva replied, blocking another curse. Too straightforward, I'm afraid. A thunderous crack suddenly shook the chamber as the main doors blasted open. Albus Dumbledore stood in the entrance, power radiating from him in palpable waves. Behind him streamed Order members and Aurors, reinforcements at last. Tom, Dumbledore greeted calmly. I believe the minister has been keeping you entertained in my absence. Dumbledore, Voldemort hissed, real fear entering his voice for the first time. The arrival of Dumbledore shifted the battle's momentum instantly. Death Eaters who had been pressing forward began to fall back, while the Order members fought with renewed vigor. Minerva used the distraction to transfigure the floor beneath Umbridge into a sticky morass that trapped the witch up to her knees. No! Umbridge shrieked as Minerva approached her, wand raised. You can't do this. I am the minister now. I'm afraid not, Dolores, Minerva replied. The emergency powers I enacted yesterday supersede any vote of no confidence. As for you, she flicked her wand, and Umbridge's pink cardigan transformed, wrapping around her like a straitjacket. I believe you'll find Azkaban has a lovely cell prepared for collaborators. You'll pay for this. Umbridge screeched as Aurors took her into custody. When the Dark Lord prevails, he won't, Minerva cut her off flatly. And you chose the wrong side, Dolores. As you always have. Turning back to the main battle, Minerva saw Dumbledore and Voldemort locked in an extraordinary duel in the center of the chamber. Elements of fire and water, light and darkness, clashed between them in displays of magical mastery few living wizards could comprehend, let alone replicate. It's over, Tom, Dumbledore was saying as Minerva approached. Your Horcruxes are destroyed. The diadem is gone. You are mortal once more. Not all of them, old man, Voldemort replied with a terrible smile. You've missed one, the most important one. The one you can never bring yourself to destroy. A chill ran down Minerva's spine. He meant Harry. What's happening? Kingsley asked, joining Minerva as they watched the duel unfold. Dumbledore is containing him, Minerva explained. But we need to evacuate the wounded and secure the upper levels. Voldemort claimed they've taken the ministry. Not entirely, Kingsley replied grimly. They breached the Auror office and have control of the atrium, but we still hold key departments. Amelia Bones is coordinating our forces from the secure facility beneath Whitehall. Minerva was about to respond when a commotion near the entrance caught her attention. 3 teenagers burst into the chamber, led by a bespectacled boy with messy black hair and a lightning scar. Potter, she gasped in disbelief. What in Merlin's name, Minister? Harry called, sprinting toward her with Ron and Hermione close behind. We know how to end this. The Horcrux in me, Dumbledore and Snape explained everything. Voldemort's head snapped toward Harry's voice, his red eyes widening with malevolent delight. Potter. How convenient of you to deliver yourself to me. Dumbledore used the distraction to cast a containment spell that momentarily trapped Voldemort in a sphere of golden light. Harry, you must leave immediately. It's not safe. It's never going to be safe until he's gone. Harry shouted back, dodging a curse from Bellatrix. And you said it yourself, if he tries to kill me, he might destroy the Horcrux instead. Might, Potter. Minerva stressed, pulling him behind a column as spellfire intensified around them. It's a theory, not a certainty. It's the only way, Harry insisted, his green eyes blazing with determination. You've destroyed the other Horcruxes. This is the last one. What about the snake? Ron interjected, ducking as debris rained down from an explosion overhead. Nagini isn't here, Hermione pointed out, casting a shield charm to protect them. This might be our only chance to face him when he's vulnerable. Minerva's strategic mind raced, evaluating options in the midst of chaos. The plan was insanely risky, based on magical theory rather than established fact. And yet, if it worked, they could end Voldemort's threat today. Albus, she called. The snake. Is it a Horcrux? Dumbledore, still maintaining the golden containment around Voldemort, nodded once. The last one, besides Harry. Voldemort let out a roar of rage, shattering the containment spell with a blast of such power that everyone in the chamber was thrown to the ground. You will all die for this, he shrieked, his voice no longer human. "Starting with you, Potter. Everyone back," Minerva ordered, scrambling to her feet. "Get behind the defensive line." Harry stood his ground as Death Eaters and Order members alike withdrew to opposite sides of the chamber, leaving him and Voldemort in a rough circle at the center. Dumbledore attempted to move forward, but Minerva caught his arm. "Wait," she said softly. "This is what we prepared for, Albus. Trust the boy." "You've been destroying my anchors, Potter," Voldemort said, circling Harry like a predator. "Guided by the old fool and the professor. But you've overlooked something crucial." "The Horcrux inside me," Harry replied steadily. "I know all about it, Tom." Voldemort faltered, genuine surprise crossing his inhuman features. "Impossible. Dumbledore would never risk his precious chosen one. He didn't have to tell me. I figured it out." Harry tapped his scar. "This connection works both ways. I've seen inside your mind, just as you've seen inside mine. I know what you fear, and it's still death, Tom. Always death." "Then you know you must die for me to die," Voldemort hissed, raising his wand. "A sacrifice you're willing to make? How very Gryffindor." Harry didn't flinch. "You took my blood for your resurrection. My mother's protection lives in both of us now. You can't kill me, Tom, not permanently." Doubt flickered across Voldemort's face, quickly replaced by rage. "We shall see. Avada Kedavra. Expelliarmus." Harry countered simultaneously. The spells met in midair with a sound like a cannon blast. Green and red light melded into a brilliant golden beam connecting the two wands. Minerva recognized the phenomenon immediately, priori incantatem, the reverse spell effect that occurred when brother wands were forced to duel. The golden thread splintered into 1,000 more, forming a glowing cage around the two duelists. Ghostly figures began to emerge from Voldemort's wand, his recent victims first, then older ones. Cedric Diggory, killed during Voldemort's resurrection ritual the previous year. An old Muggle man. Bertha Jorkins. And then, to Harry's visible shock, James and Lily Potter materialized, smiling sadly at their son. The spectral Lily approached Harry, her voice audible only to him as she whispered something that made tears spring to his eyes. James joined her, placing an insubstantial hand on Harry's shoulder. "What's happening?" Ron whispered. "Priori incantatem," Hermione replied, her voice hushed with awe. "His wand is being forced to regurgitate its spells in reverse." "It's more than that," Dumbledore said quietly. "The echo of Lily Potter carries the same sacrificial protection that flows in Harry's blood, and in Tom's. Watch." Inside the golden cage, the ghostly figures had surrounded Voldemort, blocking his view of Harry. The Dark Lord's face contorted with fear as he tried to break the connection between the wands, but seemed unable to do so. "Now, Harry," the spectral James Potter called. Harry wrenched his wand upward, breaking the golden thread. As the cage dissolved and the figures faded, Harry did something unexpected, he charged directly at Voldemort. "Potter, no." Snape's voice rang out from the entrance where he had just arrived with additional Order members. But Harry didn't stop. He crashed into Voldemort, grabbing the Dark Lord's wand arm with his left hand while pressing his own wand directly against Voldemort's chest. "For my parents," he said, voice ringing clearly through the suddenly silent chamber. Expecto Patronum. Minerva had never seen anything like what happened next. Instead of emerging from Harry's wand, the Patronus seemed to form within Voldemort himself, a brilliant white stag materializing inside the Dark Lord's chest, its antlers spreading outward through his body. Voldemort screamed, a high, inhuman sound of pure agony. Where the Patronus touched, Voldemort's body began to crumble, as though the light was burning him from the inside out. Black smoke poured from his disintegrating form, but most shockingly, a second, smaller cloud of darkness erupted from Harry's scar, which had split open and was bleeding freely. The two soul fragments, one from Voldemort, one from Harry's scar, writhed in the air above them before the Patronus's light engulfed them both. With a final, unearthly shriek, they dissolved into nothingness. Harry collapsed to his knees as Voldemort's body crumbled entirely, leaving nothing but ash on the chamber floor. For a moment, no one moved or spoke, the silence absolute. Then Bellatrix's agonized wail broke the spell. "My lord! My lord!" She raised her wand, aiming at Harry's unprotected back, but before she could cast, multiple spells hit her simultaneously, stunning spells from Ron and Hermione, a body bind from Kingsley, and a transfiguration spell from Minerva that turned the witch's wand into a harmless rubber chicken. As Aurors moved to subdue the remaining Death Eaters, many of whom had thrown down their wands in surrender upon witnessing their master's destruction, Minerva hurried to Harry's side. He was conscious but dazed, blood still flowing from his scar. "Potter," she said, kneeling beside him. "Harry. Can you hear me?" "Minister," he mumbled, his green eyes unfocused. Did it work?" "Yes, Harry," Dumbledore answered, joining them. "It worked. Voldemort is gone, truly gone this time. The Horcrux in me?" "Destroyed," Dumbledore confirmed, examining Harry's scar with careful fingers. "Your Patronus, a manifestation of pure love and joy, was the perfect antithesis to the soul fragment's darkness. Quite ingenious, actually." "Hermione's idea," Harry managed a weak smile. "Said patron uses protect against dark creatures, thought it might work on a dark soul too." 20 points to Gryffindor, Miss Granger, Minerva said automatically, then gave a startled laugh at her own reflexive response. "Old habits, it seems." Healers were now arriving, moving among the wounded. Minerva helped Harry to a sitting position as a young Medowitch approached to tend his scar. "The Ministry?" Harry asked. "Voldemort said they'd taken it." "Not entirely," Kingsley reported, joining their group. "The atrium and several upper levels are secured now. Remaining Death Eaters are surrendering or fleeing." "And Hogwarts?" Dumbledore asked sharply. "Safe," Snape confirmed, his usually sallow face even paler than normal. "The attempted infiltration was repelled. No casualties among students." Minerva allowed herself a moment of pure relief. It wasn't over, there would be fugitive Death Eaters to round up, a ministry to rebuild, public confidence to restore. But the central threat, the shadow that had hung over the wizarding world for decades, was finally gone. "Minister," an Auror approached, looking somewhat odd. "The press has gathered in the atrium. They're requesting a statement about what happened here." Minerva nodded, rising to her feet. "I'll address them shortly." She turned to Harry, who was having his scar bandaged. "Mr. Potter, I believe you should join me. The wizarding world deserves to hear from both of us today." Harry looked startled. "Me? But I just did what you've always done," Minerva finished for him. "Faced darkness with courage and compassion. The world should know the truth of what happened here, not just about Voldemort's defeat, but about the sacrifices and choices that made it possible." As they made their way toward the atrium, Minerva reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that night in Dumbledore's office when she'd reluctantly accepted the minister position, to this moment of hard-won victory. The wizarding world would be different now, and perhaps, finally, better. 6 months later Minerva signed the last document in the stack with a flourish, watching as the parchment glowed briefly before filing itself in the appropriate cabinet. The Wisengamot's final approval of her Magical Education Reform Act had come through that morning, the culmination of 3 years of political maneuvering and the last major initiative of her term as minister. A knock at her office door drew her attention. "Enter." Kingsley Shacklebolt stepped inside, resplendent in formal navy robes. "Almost time, Minister. The atrium is at capacity, and crowds have spilled onto the street outside. Magical maintenance has created quite the sunny day for the occasion." Minerva allowed herself a small smile as she rose from her desk. "One last bit of theatrics before I return to academia, I suppose. The public will miss you, Kingsley said sincerely. Your approval ratings are the highest of any minister in recorded history. All the more reason to step down now, Minerva replied dryly. Best to leave while they still approve. She straightened her emerald robes, formal but not ostentatious, exactly as she preferred. Is everything prepared for the transition? Yes, Minister. The Wiesengemot's vote was unanimous, a first in its history. Good. You'll make an excellent minister, Kingsley. Kingsley looked momentarily discomfited, a rare occurrence for the usually unflappable Auror. I have rather enormous shoes to fill. Your administration oversaw the defeat of the darkest wizard of our time, comprehensive educational reform, improved relations with magical beings, and the most significant restructuring of the ministry in centuries. All while managing to alienate the old pureblood families, antagonize the goblins over the Gringotts raid, and scandalize the international community by appointing a known werewolf as Hogwarts headmaster, Minerva added with a touch of humor. Remus Lupin is an exceptional headmaster, Kingsley countered. And the pureblood families will adapt or become irrelevant. As for the goblins, well, they respect strength and honesty, if nothing else. Minerva gathered her notes for her farewell address. Come then. Best not to keep them waiting. They made their way to the ministry atrium, which had been transformed for the occasion. The garish golden statue that had once dominated the space, replaced during Minerva's tenure with a simple memorial to the victims of both wizarding wars, was now accompanied by a temporary platform and podium. Hundreds of witches and wizards filled every available space, while magical cameras hovered at strategic locations to broadcast the event to those outside. As Minerva stepped onto the platform, a hush fell over the crowd, followed by thunderous applause. She recognized many faces, Hogwarts students past and present, Order members, ministry employees, ordinary citizens who had lived through darkness and emerged into light. In the front row stood those who had been closest to the center of the storm, Harry Potter, now 16 and carrying himself with quiet confidence, Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger beside him, the surviving Weasley family, Sirius Black, still thin but no longer haunted-looking, Remus Lupin, his shabby robes replaced with the dignified attire befitting a headmaster, and dozens more who had fought and sacrificed. Minerva raised her hands for quiet, and the crowd gradually stilled. 6 years ago, she began, her Scottish accent clear and strong, I was a transfiguration professor with no political ambitions whatsoever. When Albus Dumbledore nominated me for the position of Minister for Magic, my first inclination was to transfigure him into a tea cozy. Laughter rippled through the audience. I accepted the role not because I wanted it, but because I believed our society stood at a crossroads. We could continue down the path of denial and complacency, or we could face the difficult truths before us and prepare accordingly. She paused, looking out over the sea of faces. The victories we have achieved came at great cost. We lost colleagues, friends, family members. We were forced to confront not only external threats, but the flaws within our own institutions, prejudice, corruption, and the dangerous comfort of willful ignorance. Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. Today, as I prepare to return to my first love, the education of young witches and wizards at Hogwarts School, I am proud of what we have built together. A ministry more transparent and accountable to the people it serves. A society more inclusive of those previously marginalized. A future where magical children of all backgrounds can thrive. She gestured to Kingsley, who stepped forward to join her. In Kingsley Shacklebolt, you will find a minister of unimpeachable integrity, exceptional judgment, and unwavering commitment to justice. I entrust the future of our world to him with complete confidence. Kingsley bowed his head in acknowledgement as another round of applause rose from the crowd. As for myself, Minerva continued, I look forward to terrorizing a new generation of students with surprise transfiguration exams and the occasional detention. This drew more laughter, especially from those who had experienced her exacting standards firsthand. But before I conclude, I wish to acknowledge one person without whom none of our achievements would have been possible. She turned toward the front row. Mr. Potter, would you join me? Looking surprised and somewhat uncomfortable with the attention, Harry made his way to the platform. He had grown taller in recent months, though he remained lean. The scar on his forehead had faded significantly since Voldemort's defeat, now just a thin, silvery line. Harry Potter has endured more in 16 years than most wizards face in a lifetime, Minerva said, placing a hand on his shoulder. He has confronted darkness with uncommon courage, not once but repeatedly. He has lost more than any child should ever lose. And yet, he has emerged not bitter, not broken, but kind and determined to build a better world. Harry's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but he stood straight beside her. It is to young people like Mr. Potter, and Miss Granger, Mr. Weasley, and countless others, that we owe our future. They remind us that the true measure of a society is not its wealth or power or the purity of its bloodlines, but its compassion, its justice, and its willingness to protect the vulnerable. Minerva turned to face Harry directly. Mr. Potter, on behalf of the Ministry of Magic and the wizarding community, I thank you. Your parents would be immensely proud of the young man you have become. Harry's eyes glistened with unshed tears as Minerva presented him with an Order of Merlin, first class, an honor she had insisted upon despite his protests that he had only done what anyone would do. As the ceremony concluded and the formal transfer of power to Kingsley began, Minerva found herself approached by Albus Dumbledore, who had attended quietly from the side of the atrium. A remarkable term as minister, Minerva, he said, his blue eyes twinkling behind his half-moon spectacles. I dare say you've accomplished more in 4 years than most achieve in 40. Necessity is a powerful motivator, Albus, she replied. Though I won't pretend I'm not relieved to be returning to Hogwarts. Politics is an exhausting business. And yet you navigated it masterfully. Dumbledore stroked his long beard thoughtfully. I wonder if you might find the role of deputy headmistress somewhat understimulating after your time as minister. Minerva arched an eyebrow. Are you suggesting I've outgrown the position, Albus? Merely observing that talents such as yours deserve the broadest possible canvas. His eyes twinkled mischievously. Perhaps you might consider the headmistress position instead. I find myself increasingly drawn to research and travel in my advancing years. Minerva stared at him in surprise. You're retiring. After all this time. Not retiring, my dear Minerva, evolving. Dumbledore smiled serenely. There are magical mysteries I've long wished to explore, ancient wisdom to rediscover. And Hogwarts deserves a leader with fresh vision for this new era. Before Minerva could respond, they were joined by Harry, Ron, and Hermione, who had navigated through the crowd to reach them. Minister. Harry stumbled over the correct title. Minerva will do, Mr. Potter, she said with uncharacteristic informality. At least until term begins, at which point it will be Professor McGonagall once more. Yes, ma'am, Harry replied automatically. I just wanted to say, thank you. For everything. If you hadn't become minister when you did, if you hadn't believed Voldemort was trying to return. Many things would have unfolded differently, Minerva acknowledged. Though I suspect you three would have found yourselves in the thick of trouble regardless. Ron grinned. Probably. Actually, Hermione interjected, we wanted to ask about your educational reforms. Now that they've passed, will Hogwarts really be offering advanced placement courses for students interested in specific career tracks? Indeed, Miss Granger. Starting this September, 6th and 7th years may select specialized courses aligned with their career aspirations. Minerva couldn't help but smile at Hermione's enthusiasm. I believe you expressed interest in magical law. Yes. And international magical cooperation. And perhaps advanced arithmancy, Hermione, you can't take every advanced course, Ron interrupted with fond exasperation. There aren't enough hours in the day. Actually, Mr. Weasley, Dumbledore interjected with a mysterious smile, you might be surprised at what can be accomplished with proper time management. As the conversation continued, Minerva found herself looking around the atrium at the wizarding world she had helped shape, diverse groups mingling freely, former rivals engaged in civil conversation, young witches and wizards looking toward the future with hope rather than fear. There was still much to do, of course. Prejudices centuries in the making would not vanish overnight. Dark wizards would rise again, though perhaps not as terrible as Voldemort. Political squabbles would continue, reforms would be contested, progress would sometimes stall. But standing here, surrounded by the next generation of magical leaders, Minerva McGonagall felt something she had scarcely allowed herself during her years as minister: optimism. Not the cautious hope of wartime, but genuine belief that the wizarding world could become better than it had been. As the formal ceremony concluded and Kingsley Shacklebolt took his oath of office, Minerva slipped away from the crowd. There was packing to be done, arrangements to make for her return to Hogwarts. And perhaps, she thought with a small smile, a list of improvements to begin planning for her potential tenure as headmistress. After all, she had never been one to rest on her accomplishments. There was always more to teach, more to learn, more to transform, whether in a classroom or across an entire magical society. Minister McGonagall's term might be ending, but Professor McGonagall's work was far from complete. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.